Final main sitting day of the inquiry. Firstly, just to let you know, apparently we're on a standby workaround IT system again. So if everybody can make sure that they do everything possible to ensure that they're I think that probably goes for helps people in the room as well. So if you can just do what you can to speak clearly into the microphone. I think it works best where it's fairly close and you sort of got it basically in the direction that you're speaking. So thank you for that. Just to say yesterday, I did the site visits as planned. Good job it was yesterday. Not today, I don't think I would be seeing much today. Thank you to Secretary now for organising the crane, which I thought that was there and that was in good time. So I've now seen all the viewpoints that are on the list. So I've got a good feel for the likely impact of the development. So that I think is that. I also had time. But since I wasn't going to get my fix of nerd at Milton Keynes DHL warehouse, I did visit Blisswood Tunnel. So as a transport planner, I was very keen to see Blisswood Tunnel and even made a pilgrimage to Wollaston. I'll let you work out yourselves why it was a pilgrimage to Wollaston. Okay, nothing to do with the inquiry at this stage there. So just in terms of some admin things, so I see it's appeared on the website. I see an addendum for the list of conditions, which thank you. I think that's now got the list of plans that I asked for. I had a quick look through them, obviously I need to check them off against these plans I've got and what's on the website. There appear to be, I think, about 52 plans and there's about 58 in here. So that should be all right. I'm hoping they are all in there. If there's any discrepancies, I'll obviously come back in writing over that, or I can certainly I'll look on the website in the first instance. But if they've got any issues, I'll come back on that. So thank you for that. I see there's a revised, a revised, I'm not sure, but certainly a new condition 6, which deals with the street lighting. I also see that condition 5 is now agreed. So that is that the case? Condition 5 is now agreed. So there's now between the appellant and the council, there's no disagreement over any conditions.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That. So that is that bit of admin. Is there any other admin from anybody?
Yes, so good morning. Just one additional bit of housekeeping, and you may have seen it. I think it only went to your case office.
Oh, the UU.
The UU. And so you'll recall discussion on Wednesday about whether in effect, for the benefit of those in the room, there be an additional obligation that if the footway and cycle contribution isn't spent because the rest of AR1 comes forward, then there's still a commitment to provide it to the council. It's called a cumulative infrastructure contribution to in fact go towards the cumulative impact of the remaining AR1 sites. Now, sir, as you'll recall, it's actually the appellant's position that it isn't necessary, and I think the council didn't come to a clear view. But our client was very keen that it was a commitment we were willing to make, and we wanted to ensure you had the ability, if you felt it necessary, to hold DHL to that. So that's the purpose of that. And so I've got a hard copy of the rules.
Right. Yeah, if you don't mind, actually, that would be helpful. Presumably you've seen this, or not yet, or you're
No, I haven't seen it yet. So it has been just handed to me.
Oh, right.
I haven't had a look at it. I mean, I don't think at the moment I can say much about it other than what I said the other day, which we doubt it's still compliant. But we'll have a look, and if you want any views from us, or
yeah, it would be. So just in terms of the conditions, we've got this final list of conditions. Well, final at this stage list of conditions. As I say, if State Coast now can come back by Monday with any comments on that. As I say, I do emphasise that it's significant if you've got significant points, not just looking for our general thoughts are type of thing. It would perhaps also, and then for the appellant and the council to come back with any comments on those by the following Monday. If the council could perhaps also comment on the UU by the following Monday, what's the 10th or something, isn't it?
yes.
That would be, it would be helpful to definitely get a response on that, just so I know what your position.
Yes, I mean, I doubt it's going to change, but once we've reviewed it carefully, we'll let you know.
Okay. Anything else in terms of procedural matters? Okay. Just in terms of timing, so obviously the only thing we've got, substantive thing we've got today is to hear Mr. Guthrie's evidence. Just reviewing what were maximum timings given, they amount in total to 4 hours. Obviously that doesn't include time for re-examination, any questions I've got, and we also will need a mid-morning break at some point. So we haven't got 4 hours, we haven't even got much more than 3 hours, I suspect. So what I have done is because we are going to finish this inquiry by this element of the inquiry by 1 p.m. today, is reduced those timings to maximums, which I am going to have to enforce maximums. So basically 2/3 what it was. So that's 40 minutes for evidence in chief, an hour, and these are maximums. So I'm not saying, it's not targets to go up to. The Jake an hour and 20 minutes.
Ought to be ample.
Right, okay. And Mr. Stedman Jones, 40 minutes. Okay. So otherwise, and I will, if we get a bit of spare time, I'll go with all of those just to ensure fairness so that people aren't saying, they went over, so I want that, and all that. So those will be the time limits we work to, together with breaks, re-examination, any questions, and obviously some final comments at the end. I think that should take us up to pretty much 1 o'clock anyway. So I think that's it. With that, over to you, Mr. Roseman, to introduce your final witness.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd like to call James Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me first introduce you to the inquiry. You tell us in your proof at section 1 that you are James Guthrie. You hold a master's in planning with real estate from the University of Manchester. You're a chartered member of the RTPI and an associate member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Yes. You also tell us that you're the director at Quad, one of the largest independent planning consultancies in the UK, and you note in particular that you have 10 years experience principally acting within the private sector. Yes. And you also note that you sit on the British Property Federation and that you're a regular contributor on behalf of the BPF, the National Planning Policy, and in particular, industrial strategy consultation. Yes. Now you say this at 1.4, but I think best to hear it in your own words as to your experience and familiarity with the site and this application.
Yes, thank you. I visited the site on various occasions since my initial involvement. I was appointed back in September 2020 on the project to initially undertake due diligence on behalf of DHL and then to lead on the planning application. So I've acted as planning lead, I should say, on the project right from inception from DHL's perspective through to the drafting, preparation, submission of the planning application, and then also the key point of contact with local authority throughout that time.
Thank you. Finally, as part of this introductory section, you tell us at 1.6, you note that Mr. Anderson has dealt with highways, Mr. Hammond has dealt with landscape and visual impact, Mr. Brooke has dealt with market demand. You've been listening to their oral evidence as well as you have regard to their written. Do you adopt their evidence for your evidence?
Yes, I do.
And is it your role today in any way to re-examine or address things in which they have given expert evidence?
No.
Now, your proof is taken as read, and I think the mantra of this inquiry has been cutting to the chase. So let's do just that and just deal with a few points that have arisen or taken prominence in the oral evidence we've heard. First of all, I just want to ask briefly about DHL operation. You'll recall in week one, I think there was some discussion about the nature of the operation of a DHL supply chain facility. And we know the inspector might have been tempted but didn't feel the need to visit a facility. But I'm hoping you can assist with painting a picture verbally. How do these custom-built DH facilities operate? Is it just a large post office?
No, so this division of DHL Real Estate Solutions, as you rightly said, specialises in developing custom-built facilities for businesses. So that largely depends on customer requirements. Each building is slightly different. You might have one customer in a building, you might have up to 28 customers in a building. We directed you, Sarah, I guess, towards Milton Keynes. That is a very clear example of what we're looking to do at this site. Milton Keynes, the unit there is 260,000 square foot versus 264,000. So it will take the same floor plate. In that unit there, we have 28 different customers operating on their behalf, who supply chain operate on their behalf. To give one example, perhaps about 5% of the warehouse is operating on behalf of Sainsbury's. If you go around a new Sainsbury's store, you will have a Zapper that helps you use that as you go around your shopping. DHL supply chain will import those apples on behalf of Sainsbury's. They will set up a virtual store. They will install the right software, and then as Sainsbury's open up their new store, they will then be sent those new apples out there. So it's a value add proposition rather than a parcel distribution facility as part of DHL operates. And there's various customers doing various different things all around the warehouse, and that might change and flex.
Let's turn to next, just a few questions on the SPD. On Wednesday, Mr. Weeks and Ms. Ford agreed that the SPD is guidance, not policy. Do you agree with them as well?
Yes, I do.
They also set out that if the proposal accorded with AL1 and SS2, then any tension with the SPD shouldn't lead to a dismissal of the appeal. Do you agree with that proposition as well?
Yes, I do.
Does the SPD allow for large buildings of any height come forward on AL1?
Yes, the SPD places no limit on that.
Does it require, we've heard this phrase a few times, does it require the SPD that large buildings are invisible?
No.
Does the SPD introduce into policy AL1 a test of exceptionality?
No, and if I may go slightly further,
please.
As we have just confirmed, SPD cannot introduce new policy tests. There is perhaps the seeking of introduction of a test of exceptional circumstances for large buildings. There is no clear definition of what that test might be in the SPD. Furthermore, there are numerous references within the document to that exceptional circumstances test. If you then go into the design briefs for each of the AL sites, it's notable that for AL2 and AL4, there is reference to said test, but for AL1, of which the site is within, and there is no such reference to the circumstances test.
And do you think that is a typo, or do you think that is intentional in the way in which it's not in the NL1 section?
I believe that's been intentional from my reading.
In your view, what weight should be given to the SPD by the inspector?
It's of course a matter for the inspector. However, I would consider limited weight, but if I may go further, there has been reference to various submissions on behalf of DHL on the matter, and the key one being called, I need to find it, but it's our SPD compliance statement, which sets out our compliance with the SPD regardless of the weight to which we attach to it. Thank you. Yeah, CD107. Yes, actually, right.
Yes, CD107. But having said limited weight, in your view, does the proposal comply or conflict with the SPD?
It complies with this.
Next topic, just briefly, is AL1. And feel free to, but I think we'll all be familiar with it already. A few questions on that. In your view, reading AL1 as a whole rather than simply cherry, does AL1 limit allocations to only small and medium enterprises?
No, there is no reference in policy AL1 in the policy box to small and medium.
Does it limit allocations to only meeting a local or localized business need?
No.
I'll just summarize what AL1 paragraph 1 says and AL1 paragraph 3 says. AL1 paragraph 1 talks about a variety of employment types, reflecting the need for diversity of reliance on the local economy. 3 requires an independently assessed market evidence mix. And I just want to ask a few questions in relation to those two elements of the policy. To be clear, because I know there was some discussion at the start of last week about it, what is the mix that this scheme is proposing?
So for the DHL scheme,
yes.
Independently, you are looking at a mix of 96.5%, which is B8 only, and then 3.5%, which is flexible B2 D8s.
Okay. But then if we take into account the residual elements of AL1, by which I mean the bell plantation, what does the mix then become?
So it's probably best to handle this in a slightly different way. So when we look at the market evidence that's been provided, it's typically around large floor plate units and small floor plate units. So it's probably best to balance across where those can be delivered across the site. So you have, in essence, 75% of AL1 when read as a whole with the bell plantation site can be delivered as large floor plate units, and then 25% of AL1 can be delivered as smaller floor plate units.
And can I just ask the discussion on this, we've referred to this a few times, it's been on floor space.
Yes.
Which, and the policy doesn't, it says a variety of employment types, it doesn't say how to measure that in any way. Floor space is obviously one way. Another way, I suppose, is likely employment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately the aim of this is to provide people with jobs. So ultimately, that's probably more important than floor space. Have you any idea? I mean, I don't think there's any specific evidence on this, but have you any thoughts on if we're saying it's 96% B8 and 75% B8 DHL or AL1 as a whole in terms of floor space? Have you any idea what that would be like in terms of likely employment, or is it just too difficult to say?
In terms of the numbers, so 75% provide so many jobs and 25% provide so many jobs.
Yes. Well, I suppose what I'm saying is if it's 75% B8 floor space, right, would that be likely to give rise to 75% jobs in B8, or more than 75% jobs in B8 or less than 75% jobs in B8? Just on your, I mean, I don't think there is any evidence on that, is there? But just in terms of your experience.
You should rephrase the question, sorry, I'm not sure.
So we're saying the 75% floor space, which is to be B8.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of actual jobs, the number of jobs that would be developed on the site, and I'm talking about the whole AL1 site here, would the BA jobs be likely to be very similar to that? So 75% of the total number of jobs on AL1 would also be B8 jobs, or would they be more likely to be more than 78.5% or less than 75%, or do you just not have the information to say?
I think it's probably one for Mr. Brooks' evidence.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure I completely understand the question, very sorry, but in terms of, are we saying in terms of would the jobs be different between the 75% and 25%?
No, do you follow my question?
I think so. There is a note from Mr. Brooke on this.
Have we got that?
Yes. I'll just try and find the core document number on it. But I think Mr. Guppy, I think the inspector's question is, the split is 75%, 25 across AL1. Yeah. But does that reflect in the jobs? If you take the total jobs, 75% of them will be BAs, 25% of them will be. So that's your question?
Yes, yeah. Does 75% of floor space of B8 lead to 75% of the total number of jobs of B8? Or does it lead to 90% of the jobs being B8, or does it lead to 50% of B8?
Yeah,
obviously those precise figures are not
very terms. There are various job figures throughout, and I would defer largely to Mr. Brooks. But I can answer part of the question, and thank you for helping to explain it. DHL have provided job estimates for their buildings. So when you provide job estimates, you have to use obviously generic figures. Larger units do provide slightly less jobs. They are more efficient units in what they do. So the DHL numbers, so you would probably have slightly less job numbers in the 75%. It would be denser in terms of job numbers in the 25%. Is that answering the question?
Yes. So I mean, I've forgotten or not quite appreciated. We've got the evidence from Mr. Brooks, but that's so basically what your thought is, that 75% of floor space might lead to, and I'm making the figure up here, but might lead to 70% of the jobs being in B8 and 30% of the jobs being in non-B8.
Sorry, yes, correct, exactly.
Yeah. Okay,
thank you. And so just for your reference, that note is CD 100 and 115.09. Now that's zooming in a bit more on the type of job, but I think that will partly address that.
Okay, thank you. Hard work for a Friday morning. Sorry.
Now, we were talking there about, if you look at AL1 as a whole, we've got that 75 to 25. But then that leads to this next question, which is it appropriate, in your view, to take account of the AL1 residue in this regard? I mean, do DHL support permission being granted on the Bell plantation?
Yes, our case of permission should be granted on the residual of AL1, subject to mitigating its impact on the network.
So is it appropriate when looking at this mix to look at the mix of AL1 as a whole?
Yes.
So 75, 25 codes. And you've referenced it, but I'll also lead on it because it's Mr. Brooks' unchallenged market assessment. This element was unchallenged, that the market assessment shows it should accommodate 80%, 20% split. So can I ask you this? How does the AL1 proposal match with the independently assessed market evidence?
Very closely.
And so just a reference to your analysis, that's 7.2.4 of Mr. Brooks' proof just sets that up. Very close. So does this proposal meet the requirements of AL1, paragraph 1, paragraph 3?
Yes.
And this is because the inspector asked this question of a few witnesses. In your view, is there therefore a dichotomy between paragraph 1 and paragraph 3?
No, not in my opinion, no.
So in your view, does the proposal comply or conflict with AL1 as a whole?
The proposal complies.
And how important is policy AL1 to this determination?
There are, of course, various material considerations. However, policy AR1 is the primary consideration in the vote.
Very briefly next, just want to deal with highways in this regard. So highways has already been dealt with in detail by Mr. Anderson, and we've discussed earlier, it's not your role to address points he's addressed. I just want to very briefly look at things from an MPPF policy context. And if you have the MPPF, turning to paragraph 115D, although we will all be familiar with it, I'm sure.
Yes, sorry, I
just want to take this in a few small stages. Does this scheme have to address paragraph 115D?
Yes.
And does it? You've heard Mr. Anderson's evidence. Does this scheme address 115D?
Through the mitigation proposed, yes.
You went ahead and see my next question. How does this scheme ensure that 115D is addressed in that?
Through the mitigation proposed, as Mr. Anderson set out.
Okay. So meeting 115D through mitigation. Next step. Would future allocation applications have to address paragraph 115D?
Yes.
And how would they address 115D?
Through their own skill.
Okay. Turning then to paragraph 116, and again, we're familiar with it. If need be, we can turn to the glossary at page 77, but I'll ask you, paragraph 116 talks about looking at all reasonable future scenarios. Are you aware what is a reasonable future scenario in terms of interpretation?
A realistic scenario.
Okay. Now we've heard the highways evidence on this, but in planning terms, from a planning perspective, is it realistic in your view that all future allocations would come forward without mitigation? No. Okay. But actually, Mr. Guthrie, let's take a step back. Do you recall, ignore for a moment whether these scenarios are realistic or not, acid on stilts or the term that we used earlier. Regardless of whether they're realistic or not, do you recall, in all future scenarios Mr. Anderson looked at, does this scheme with mitigation make things worse, better, or neutral? Better. Okay. So, if there was a possibility of a severe cumulative effect in the future, would this scheme with mitigation have ever contributed to it? No. What, in fact, will this scheme have done in relation to any possible severe residual effect in the future?
Made it significantly better.
On that basis, having heard the evidence of Mr. Anderson, does this proposal, in your view, meet paragraphs 115 and 116?
Yes, it does.
Just to get your view on one final matter, we've heard, and I think it was said very clearly on Wednesday, we've heard the council's solution or answer to this, which is to wait for a cumulative strategic mitigation scheme. But as of today, I think I can lead on this as it's agreed. There's no design, there's no funding, there's no timetable. Is that, in your view, an appropriate response to delivering an allocation that's been in place since 2020?
No.
Is that good planning in your view?
No.
Why not?
In the absence of no cumulative scheme, the only other choice would be to not deliver any local plan employment AL allocation in this instance, in the context of what is, in my view, an up-to-date level.
Would that accord, in your view, with the plan-led system?
No.
Benefits, which is the second last section. You summarise the benefits at page 17 of your proof, and I'm not going to ask you to read them out, but if you want to have them in front of you, that's where you start dealing with the benefits of this scheme.
Yes, that's
Firstly, I just want you to confirm, because again, the reason you're called at the end of all the evidence, if you hear all the other evidence, you can revise or come to different views. Having heard all the evidence, does your view remain as to those benefits you set out in your proof?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I'd just like to follow that up with two areas of questions. First area, you talk there of economic benefits. In terms of the December 2024 MPPF, new MPPF, generally, as a general comment first, Section 6, which is the building a strong competitive economy, was that watered down, untouched, strengthened in the new MPPF?
Significantly strengthened.
And just then to go to two particular additions, and I know the inspector had asked a question about one of them to witnesses on Wednesday. I think these are both new additions, new wording that appears in the December 24 MPPF. Firstly, 86C talks about paying particular regard to facilitating development to meet the needs of the modern economy, which includes identifying suitable locations for uses such as freight and logistics, laboratories, factories, etc. Does that new addition have relevance to this appeal scheme?
Yes.
Why?
So to maybe go back a couple of steps, I think it is of some relevance. The MPPF has been updated many times over many years by various different parties, principally focusing on housing. We now, of course, have a new government with a particular focus on growth, and in updating the MPPF, they have felt it important to highlight the importance of economy, and in particular modern economy, and very specifically, they've introduced new wording on their support for freight and logistics.
And so what relevance does that have to this appeal scheme? Does it?
It provides significant support as material consideration and determination.
Equally, 87B, now this was something that was expanded. So initially 87B existed in a previous form where it talked about storage and distribution operations at a variety of scales and in suitably accessible locations. But the new MPPF added that allow for the efficient and reliable handling of goods, especially when this is needed to support the supply chain, transport, innovation, and decarbonisation. Again, does that, in your view, have relevance to this appeal scheme?
Absolutely. We, of course, have been speaking a lot ourselves, I guess, as the appellant about DHL supply chain. This is a supply chain operation that is specifically referenced now in paragraph. I think people have done with significant support in favour of this.
Second area in relation to benefits, there's just one question. Do you recall the point was put to, I think, Mrs. Ford, that if there is a low level of less than substantial harm to the Eastern Leicester registered park, then that had to be outweighed by public benefits, and she agreed that it would be here. For completeness, can I ask your view for that question?
I would agree with that position.
Final section, final questions, conclusion. Mr. Guthrie, you'll be well aware of this, but for the benefit of those in the room, your role as a professional expert planning witness under the RTPI is to listen to all the evidence, partly why you're called last, and to update your own objective expert view accordingly, if necessary to do so. So these final questions I want to ask, because while it's clear in your proof, I want to understand whether it remains your evidence to this inquiry. Is the development plan up to date in your view?
Yes.
And does the appeal scheme comply or conflict with the development plan as a whole?
It complies.
In terms of material considerations, are there any that in your view justify departing from the development plan?
No.
A main material consideration is the MPPF. Does that support or conflict with the appeal scheme?
It supports the appeal scheme.
Okay. So given those answers, what does section 38(6), paragraph 11C of the NPPF direct a decision maker to do in those circumstances?
It makes clear that where proposals are in accordance with an up-to-date development plan, they must be approved without delay.
Mr. Guthrie, thank you very much. If you just wait there, I'm sure there'll be some questions from my own friend. Right? So let's cut to the chasing part. I think I've shaved 10 minutes of them.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Mr. Guthrie.
Good morning.
Mr. Guthrie, if we could just start, please, with your approach to the framework. Just to clarify a few points with you. In your proof of evidence at 4.4, you say the NPPF will take precedence over the development plan position where inconsistencies arise. I mean, that's not right, is it? In fact, the development plan will always remain the starting point for decision making, and the NPPF will only ever be a material consideration. That's correct, isn't it?
The development plan will only accord where it's up to date with the NPPF, and of course the NPPF is updated in 2024, so we must test policies against their accordance with the NPPF.
Yeah, but Mr. Guthrie, there's a fundamental difference between taking into account the policies in the NPPF as material considerations, compared to saying that the NPPF is somehow overrides the development plan. There's a fundamental difference in those two positions.
Okay.
If you're not sure about that, let's just take up the NPPF. If you could turn, for example, to paragraph 2.
Yes.
Planning law requires that applications for planning permission should be determined in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The National Planning Policy Framework must be taken into account in preparing the development plan and is a material consideration in planning decisions. You can't elevate the NPPF per se above the statutory development plan, can you?
No, but it must be taken into account in all decisions.
Yeah, of course. And paragraph 12 makes this clear again. It's quite an important point in terms of decision making. Paragraph 12, if you've got that.
Yes.
The presumption in favour of sustainable development does not change the statutory status of the development plan as a starting point of decision making. And then it talks about where a planning application conflicts with an up-to-date development plan, permission should not usually be granted. You see that?
Yes, but if I may add.
Hang on, I haven't asked the question yet. I haven't asked the question. And then it says local planning authorities may take decisions that depart from an up-to-date development plan, but only if material considerations in a particular case indicate that the plan should not be followed. See that?
Yeah.
And you've just answered, and that's in your proof as well, you've accepted that the local plan, council's local plan, is up to date. Yes?
When read as a whole, yes.
Yeah. And in that context then, if the scheme, your scheme, when assessed against the up-to-date local plan, is found to be in conflict with it, it should be refused, shouldn't it?
Yes, however, I will add that our view is that our proposals comply with them.
Yeah, of course, that's your stance. Thank you.
And just a point here that's just gone through my mind. That 12,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that is entirely strictly correct in what it says. In that it says, apart from an up-to-date development plan. Well, whether your plan's up to date or not.
You're quite right.
Yeah.
You're quite right, sir. Yes.
Not that affects.
No, but you are quite right.
But it does potentially affect it to the point I just think this plan was adopted in 2020, wasn't it? Do we know what date in 2020 it was adopted? Because at some point in the not too distant future, it will
July or June, so.
June of I think the inspector's report was 23rd of June, so before that.
I think 22nd of July 2020, 1.1.1 of the.
Oh, right, 22nd of July. Okay. Right. Okay, next slide.
Yes, no, thank you. So you're quite right, absolutely. And also, I don't know if you were going to this point that it would be out of date after 5 years, but it wouldn't, of course. You're just required to review it after 5 years to see whether it's out of date. It doesn't automatically just.
No, well, it doesn't, No.
Just in case that's where you were going.
But I'm not, no, and none of it really matters anyway, because that up-to-date bit is wrong.
You're right. You're right. And thank you for spotting that. You're quite right, sir. You are quite right about that.
But we're all just pointing out that we're in the,
Yes. But Mr. Guthrie, it just emphasises the point that it's the development plan that takes priority from a statutory perspective, and all the NPPF can ever do, however important it is, can be a material consideration.
I'm happy to accept that. Yeah.
Thank you. So to that extent, if we take up your proof again, it's fair to say, isn't it, then that your paragraph 4.4 needs to be tempered and read in light of what we've just agreed.
I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you. Now, the other points that I just wanted to go through first with you are these. In terms of the inspector's report, you refer to that in your proof of evidence at 6.3, so it's page 31. And you've underlined certain words where you've quoted from the, actually, I think, is this you quoting from the committee report, actually? Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I thought that was from the inspector's report. That's fine. Now, you were involved, you say, I think since 2020, is that right, with this scheme?
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yes.
And the application itself was submitted in October 21?
Yeah.
And in terms of any changes that were made to the design, and I'm not talking about landscaping and so on, but in terms of the actual scale and massing, the only change was the reduction in height, wasn't it?
That's the most material change, just correct.
Thank you.
Can I just suggest you move your microphone to be sort of
More in front.
more in front of you?
Is that better to say?
Yeah, move it even a bit more possibly. Yeah,
Sorry, I'll move some stuff around. There we go.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think you described that as a fairly minor change, actually, in your evidence.
Is there a paragraph that says mine?
Yes, you say that you updated the ES with this minor change, but I'll take you to that in a
I think
moment.
we say to address the minor revision.
That's right, exactly. So that's how you describe that,
Yes.
the reduction in height, a minor revision. Right, now, dealing then with your comments about the SPD, I was interested to see what you say, and you've repeated it to some extent in your examination here. As far as you're concerned, the SPD should be, it's not sound, you say?
That is my opinion.
Yes. 6.23 is where I am, page 34.
Yeah.
You also say it should be afforded very little, and in brackets, if any weight, in the as a material consideration.
So I'm happy to accept very little rather than if any.
Yes, because you do say again, I mean, it's helpful that you're clarifying these points. 6.30, you tell the inspector as well, as I set out above, I consider the SPD should carry no weight in the determination of this appeal. And that's a dangerous thing to tell the inspector, isn't it?
I accept that should say very little.
Yes, but you agree that it's dangerous if the inspector gave us no weight at all.
I don't agree it's dangerous, but I'm happy to accept very limited weight as a more appropriate.
Why would it not be dangerous if the inspector accepted your advice to give the SPD zero weight?
But the SPD is still being consulted on,
Exactly.
so it should still carry some, in my opinion, very limited weight. So I will accept.
But it would be dangerous for him to give it no weight.
I'm not saying it would be dangerous. I'm saying that very limited weight should be attached.
It would be a flawed decision, Mr. Guthrie, wouldn't it, if the inspector gave no weight to a document that's been consulted upon, adopted, and has not been challenged, and is relatively recent.
The weight to be given to the SPD is a matter for the inspector to determine.
The level of weight, yes, but to give it no weight, I'm suggesting would be a flawed decision in light of, and I'm giving you the reasons why you're planning, you know this. It's been consulted upon, yes.
Yes,
It's been adopted, yes.
Yeah.
And it's not been challenged.
correct.
In those circumstances, for the inspector to give it no weight would not be right.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
Thank you. It's fair to say, though, that your opinion of the SPD and the no weight that you have suggested in your text, at least, is indicative, isn't it, of the approach that the appellant has taken to the design principles in the SPD, because you think they're not sound and you think they shouldn't be given any weight.
I disagree entirely with that statement. If you read our SPD compliance statement, and appended to that is our representations made to the SPD. The first representation to the SPD sets out our full support for the provision of an SPD, subject to appropriate consideration of comments, which the inspector can read those. We fully support design guides, we fully support the approach of an SPD. However, the way in which this SPD was prepared, the matters which are within the SPD notes, we consider there should be very limited weight attached to it. If I may finish, sorry. The very important thing, of course, to remember to that SPD note is it's an SPD compliance note. It's not an SPD, it's not saying anything else other than setting out how we comply, even if we dispute the level of weight to be attached to that SPD.
Well, the inspector will read your compliance note and he'll see what it says. I mean, effectively, almost every paragraph refers to how you think it's unsound. It should be given very little weight. And then you attach your objection to it. And even now you're repeating that point about...
May I?
Absolutely, ask you the question. And you're repeating even now the limited relevance you think that it has to the to your scheme. I mean, it's fair to say that you don't like the SPD, Mr. Guthrie, and that's very clear from your compliance note and appendices, because the scheme is not compliant with the design principles in the SPD. That's fair, isn't it?
No, we think the SPD could have done much more than it has done if it was prepared in a more sound manner. We fully comply with the SPD as set out in the compliance note. But that, I think, regardless of weight to be attached, we fully comply with it. We just feel that there would have been other ways in which the council could approach the preparation of SPD. So there is absolutely no position where we do not think we comply. We fully comply with the SPD.
Well, Mr. Guthrie, you say that you fully comply with it. I mean, you don't fully comply with it, certainly in terms of scale and size. But just in terms of what you say you did after the SPD was adopted, you told us already the only thing you changed was the height.
Yes.
Yes. So,
and may I go further, because we comply with the SPD as drafted, there are no limits to scale and size in the SPD.
well, that's your submission point. But in terms of what you did after the SPD was adopted, it was nothing other than just drop the height by 3 meters.
Yes, because we comply with the SPD.
Now, I'm going to suggest that your dislike of the SPD because it didn't do what you wanted has infected the entire design approach that you've taken to this scheme, but particularly because you have treated the SPD as something which you say in your own proof to be given no weight. As a planner, did you advise your client of your opinion of the SPD that it should be given no weight?
I said that regardless of our opinion of weight, we should seek to comply with the SPD as it will be a material consideration in decision making.
I see. All right. I think it's common ground. I mean, despite your dissatisfaction with the SPD, at no point did your client challenge the SPD in court.
No.
We now just look at the approach that the inspector we say will need to take in relation to this scheme. If you can take up the NPPF first.
Yes.
And I just want to see how relevant it is for you to focus on the size issue and the fact that you say there's no restriction on size, because that's your big point, isn't it? There's no restriction on size. in, you say, in the local plan or the SPD.
Correct.
And we can see why that's important, because if you look at your proof of evidence as well, you're guided by a need to maximise the development. And you can see that, and we've obviously got your landscape evidence, but if you look at paragraph 620 on page 34 of your proof.
Yes.
I would also add the design code provides an innovative approach to mitigation supported by the NPPF, allowing the site to sensitively maximise the density achievable. You see that?
I do.
Yeah. But that's really, I mean, that's the difference between us. Your position is that you are entitled and allowed to maximise the density and to build to any size that suits the applicant or appellant. And that's portrayed there, isn't it, by your use of the word maximise?
So the NPPF seeks to make the most efficient use of land. I think reading my 6.20 in full, as I believe you did, sensitively maximise being the key. We've been guided by Mr. Hammond as to what we can appropriately achieve while mitigating the impact of the development. So yes, we have sought to make most efficient use of land, and that could be interpreted as maximising, but we have done that since.
That's very fair. So that has been the guiding principle, maximising the use of the site.
Whilst considering the constraints of development, yes.
Okay.
Just a quick question on that. In your 620, you say project would safeguard 44% of the site for enhanced green infrastructure. Does that include the football pitches?
It does include the football pitches.
Right. Now, I just want to see now how, you know, what the policies say about determining an application on this site. You know, so if we could take up, first of all, AL1,
yes.
which I think we're agreed is the key policy for this.
Happy to agree that, yes.
Yeah. So AL1 talks about land at Bell Plantation Toaster, and we have the allocation here. And you can see all the various points. We've got 2, which talks about taking an integrated, coordinated and comprehensive planning approach, yes?
Yes.
You've got land uses, you've got the Toaster Football Club, access and transport, and then 6 is key site specific design and place shaping principles for the whole development, in addition to those required under policy SS2 include, and then it sets out what's required then. Yes?
Yeah.
So we can agree, can't we, that design, specific design, related to the site,
yeah,
and place shaping principles are a key aspect of policy AL1.
Agreed.
Good. Now we need to go back a couple of pages, please, to paragraph 13.22, which is explanatory text for the policy.
13.22.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, before I ask you some questions about this, can we agree this? Explanatory text is not irrelevant, is it?
It can help support the understanding of the policy. However, it cannot replace policy work.
Absolutely. So it can't be elevated to the status of a policy, but it's not irrelevant because it explains what is meant by the policy.
It explains the intention of the policy. Yeah.
Thank you. So 13.2.2 talks about the Toaster master plan. And then if you look 4 lines down, it says, the master plan considers there to be an opportunity for business and general industrial development within use classes B1, B2, and B8 in this location. Yes?
Could I add a point to that?
I mean, do you agree with that statement? Right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, elaborate.
The Toaster master plan adopted in 2011 provides no reference to any of the allocation sites and provides no growth in north of the town. So it could be considered out of weight in accordance with this paragraph.
Yeah, fair enough. It's just what it does, it envisages there. B1, B8, and B2. Just over the page, we can see 13.2. The page before it mentions that, just so we're clear, we're talking about the right things, Toaster employment allocations.
Yeah.
Okay. And now if you look at 13.2.3, the Bell Plantation site is allocated at the A43A5 junction. I think we all know that. Northwest of Toaster and represents an appropriate employment location for the provision, and you see here, of additional small and medium-sized commercial buildings close to the town as its planned expansion takes place. Yes? So certainly here, in terms of the explanatory text, we do get this guidance that we're looking at small and medium-sized commercial buildings with employees of fewer than 250.
So I think if I could just add to that, so one, of course, it does not exclusively say small and medium.
So it does not what?
Sorry, it does not. It does not exclusively say small and medium-sized units.
No, that's not the question.
Can I finish?
Are you answering the question though?
If you repeat the question.
Okay, then you can elaborate.
I've forgotten what the question was.
Exactly.
What was the question?
The question is that looking at 13.2.3, we both agreed that this explanatory text helps inform the policy. It here envisages, doesn't it, and it being an appropriate location for the provision of small and medium-sized commercial buildings.
Yes, however, it does not exclusively say small and medium-sized buildings only.
No, it doesn't say, no, it doesn't have the word only there.
No.
But it's indicating, isn't it, that it provides an opportunity for small and medium-sized buildings. It doesn't say for small, medium, and large buildings, for example.
No, but it also doesn't say many things that could be considered within B1, B2, B8.
Oh, all right. I hear what you say. I mean, it mentions small and medium, doesn't mention large. We can agree that.
Yes, we agree that. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, so that's the explanatory text. Now, I would suggest to you that the reason that the explanatory text refers to small and medium is tied to point 6 of SS2 when it talks about site-specific design and place-shaping principles. Because it's describing the site as being suitable for that type of building, small, medium, in the context of specific design and place shaping.
I disagree. The policy needs to be read as a whole.
Okay.
And if you look at policies part 1, part 3, we're looking for an independently assessed market evidence proportion B1, B2, B8. There is no reference to small and medium within the policy text.
Okay, but size is relevant to design and place shaping, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we go back then to the other policy that's referred to there, which is SS2. Yes, it's SS2B, 1B.
Yes.
So it says permission will be granted where the proposed development uses a design-led approach to demonstrate compatibility and integration with its surroundings and distinct local character of the area in terms of type, scale, massing, siting, form, design, materials, and details. See that?
Yes.
So again, we need to understand AL1 and the site-specific design and place shaping principles alongside what is meant by that in SS2, don't we?
Yes, and I believe Mr. Hammond's evidence covered that last week.
Yes, but that I'm talking about how policies to be applied.
Fine, yes, no, I agree with it.
No. And we can see from B, can't we, that a relevant element of design, compatibility, and integration is massing, scale, form, type. Yes?
Yes.
And those factors do feed into or are relevant to whether or not a scheme integrates with an area.
Yes, and we took the advice of Mr. Hammond in the preparation of the application to ensure compliance with policy SS2, including part B.
But we have a difference between us. That's why I'm asking you about the approach to policy here.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, we've had Mr. Hammond's evidence and I've cross-examined him.
Of course.
Yeah. So the question I'm putting to you is that the question of massing, siting, form, scale is all relevant to the question of compatibility.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's relevant to compliance or otherwise with AL1.
Yes, policy AL1 specifically refers to SS2.
Yes.
Policy SS2.
And AL1 explanatory text talks about small and medium-sized buildings.
The supporting text does, yes.
Thank you. Now, if we can just look at what the inspector, local plan inspector had to say as well on this. It's,
Sorry.
four, I think it's CD 404.
Yeah, sorry about the
And if you go to paragraph 93, you can see the beginning of site allocations.
Yeah.
And we can just go to 99, please. And the inspector here is narrating, isn't he, his report here. While the employment provision of the allocations would be focused on B1, B2, and B8 uses, it's clear that other uses supportive and complementary to those mentioned would be compatible with them. So he's looking at employment provision of the allocations for B1, B2, and B8 uses. Yeah. And at 101, he deals with toaster site allocations specifically.
Yeah.
And paragraph 107 is where he's acknowledging the question of built development on open fields, yeah?
Yes.
And what he does is he says, he's acknowledging here, isn't he, that there's going to be built development on open fields. And in doing so, that would bring the urban area of Toaster closer to the settlement of Caldecott to the north. And then he says, nevertheless, there'll be a substantial undeveloped gap remaining in a gentle sloping landscape bounded by hedgerows and mature trees. But then he says this, moreover, site-specific design and place shaping principles set out in AL1 require a detailed strategic landscape assessment of the whole site to provide a high quality, which is emphasized, landscape setting. In addition, the criteria set out in policy SS2 would be relevant to any development of the AL site. Taken together, these criteria provide a strong policy basis to ensure the sensitive design of the AL1 site at the planning application stage, which would ensure the character of Caldecott and living consideration. So from this, it's clear, isn't it, that the inspector in his allocation was in no way saying that any development of any sort on this allocation would be acceptable.
No.
No. He was alive, very much alive to the fact that it was necessary for there to be a site-specific design and to have place shaping principles within policy AL1, and we've seen those, together with the criteria in policy SS2.
Yes, the inspector was acutely aware of the potential impacts of employment development on the site when allocating.
Yeah, and his reference to SS2, and we've just been to it, makes it clear that he was aware that it would be necessary to take account of scale, massing, siting, and type of any development on that site.
Yes, agreed, and that's reflected in the AL1 policy.
Sorry?
That's reflected in the AL1 policy wording as well.
Yes, but we've just looked at SS2, which is in the AL1 policy, isn't it? So my point is this, that his reference to SS2, the fact that he makes the point about the need for this detailed, careful design, and the reference back to SS2, which itself talks about scale and massing, makes it clear that those are factors that were relevant and are relevant in his mind and are relevant now, hopefully in the inspector's mind, to whether or not the scheme is acceptable or not.
Yes, of course, that's not disputed matter between us.
Thank you. So scale and massing are something the inspector will have to consider.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And then considering scale and massing, it will be relevant for the inspector to take into account what's said in the explanatory text to AL1, won't it?
In what part of the
But what about small and medium buildings? It would be relevant for the inspector to take that into account.
The supporting text cannot replace policy.
Not the question. Not the question. It will be relevant for the inspector to take that explanatory text into account, won't it?
The inspector can take the supporting text into account in making his decision. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's no reference to restricting it to small and medium sized buildings only. So yes, of course, he should take that into account.
Thank you. Thank you. And he will consider that text alongside what is said in SS2, won't he, about scale massing?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, good. Thank you for that. Can I now ask you just to look at the NPPF, please, and what is said there about matters that the inspector needs to consider? So the first point, please, is about, this emphasis I'm just going to go to that. So the emphasis that is, you've alluded to about logistics and so on. I think it's section 6, yes, 86, para 86. And you recall that you said that, well, this is strengthening the need for the emphasis on logistics and freight and that place.
It's placing a significant weight in decision making on these elements.
Yeah, and it's paragraph 86, and I think it's just important also to look at this, isn't it? This section, or paragraph 86, is talking about planning policies, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it says at C, planning policies should pay particular regard to facilitating development to meet the needs of a modern economy, including by identifying suitable locations for such uses, including laboratories, gigafactories, data centers, digital infrastructure, freight, and logistics. Now, in that context, this council has already identified, hasn't it, suitable locations for uses?
Yes.
Yes. So this, in terms of this, the council already has policy. It's got its AL allocations.
Yes, I would consider that this makes very clear that the wording of the policy AL1, perhaps not the supporting text, but the policy of AL1 is up to date against it.
Yes, but my point is that in terms of you being sort of more excited by paragraph 86, at least in this case, this council already has allocated and found suitable sites.
Yes, in our opinion, the council has found suitable sites for freight and logistics as per the wording.
Well,
just so I'm clear here, when you say, I just want to understand your question and the answer, you're answering the question that you're asking. When you say the council has already identified suitable sites, are you including AL1 in that as being B8, and were you answering it on that basis, or are you meaning other sites?
No, I'm meaning just generally in terms of allocating for employment.
But the point you made there is the council's already allocated sites for freight and logistics.
Yeah, well, maybe I haven't phrased it quite right. Let me re-put the question.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me re-put the question. 86 is dealing with planning policies, isn't it?
Agreed.
The AL sites are already employment allocations, aren't they?
Agreed.
Yeah. In terms of there's an emphasis, or there's you draw attention to the fact that there's an emphasis for the inclusion of the words freight and logistics here, digital infrastructure and the other words that are in 86C. Yes. But if we go to 86, 87, which has to be read alongside 86, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, thank you. We can see that planning policies and decisions, so now we've got to decisions, should recognise and address the specific locational requirements of different sectors. This includes making provision for, and if we go to B, it says storage and distribution operations at a variety of scales. Do you see that?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's saying specifically that while storage and distribution operations can be cited, it's at a variety of scales. It's not saying they have to be a particular size.
No.
No, it's acknowledging that there can be smaller, larger, medium scale buildings for storage and distribution operations.
Yes, and may I just add to that, of course, independently our site does that as well. We talk about minimum floor plates of 100,000 square foot. It could be 100,000, it could be 400,000. And if you take the AL site as a whole, there is a mix of storage and distribution and other uses at a variety of scales. I'd also point to the kind of end of that paragraph, 87B,
87B.
particularly says, especially where this is needed to support supply chain, transport innovation and decarbonisation, which is exactly what this scheme is seeking.
Yeah, all right, thank you. But the point that I put to you, you accept that it's a variety of scales. It takes into account that there can be smaller, medium, or larger.
Yes, variety of scales is clearly there.
Yeah, thank you. Now, in that context again, any decision on logistics or any of these particular developments have to be taken into account having regard to the impact on the character of the area, don't they?
Yes.
And the NPPF deals with that as well. If we turn to chapter 12, achieving well-designed places. Actually, before that, if you can go to the start of the NPPF, we get this very early on, paragraph 9. And it talks about achieving sustainable development, and it says that these objectives should be delivered through the preparation and implementation of plans and application of policies in this framework. They're not criteria against which every decision can or should be judged. That means that criteria above. Planning policies and decisions should play an active role in guiding development towards sustainable solutions, but in doing so, it should take local circumstances into account to reflect the character, needs, and opportunities of each area. Yes?
Yes.
This is an overriding consideration, isn't it, in the decision making, within which any decision relating to logistics or freight or distribution should be made.
To which all decisions should be made.
Yeah, thank you. If you would turn then to the section on design, which is chapter 12. And now I want to just test your position on the SPD. Ask you some questions about it, but just pushing you a little bit further on what approach the inspector needs to take, or we say the inspector should take. If you look at 132, talks about design policies should be developed with local communities so they reflect local aspirations and are grounded in an understanding and evaluation of each area's defining characteristics. Yes?
Yes.
134, design guides and codes can be prepared at an area-wide, neighbourhood or site-specific scale, and to carry weight in decision-making should be produced either as part of a plan or as supplementary planning documents. See that?
Yes.
So that's exactly what the council's done, hasn't it? It has prepared an SPD. It's taken into account all the consultation responses. Now, I know you don't like what the council's done, but obviously they've reflected local input, haven't they, here?
So just to go back to 132, developed with local communities, as you say, in consultation. Whilst consultation was undertaken on the SPD, our view is that it wasn't appropriately considered and that's set out in our SPD compliance statement. However, I go back to my initial point that regardless of waiting to be attached to the SPD, we consider we are fully in compliance with the SPD and that is set out in the SPD.
Yeah, okay, well, you're just restating your case there, Mr. Guthrie, which isn't helpful, to be honest. I mean, the question that I'm asking you is now specific about pushing the point about weight to be given to this document.
Okay.
There was some questioning of my witness day before yesterday about seeming to go along the lines, well, you know, there's nothing in the plan, the local plan specifically that says you should produce an SPD in relation to AL1. There were questions like this. What I'm putting to you now is when you look at the NPPF, it's actually quite the opposite. The NPPF at 134 specifically tells you, doesn't it, that you should have design codes and design guides. And in order for them to carry weight, they should be produced as SPDs. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, and sorry to be a broken record, but we, in our first consultation response to the SPD, we were fully supportive of the design code.
Good, all right. So we're at one on this then. SPD has been adopted. We've already established that. It addresses the allocations here, and therefore it should be carrying weight in the decision-making process. And not only has the council done it, it's done what the NPPF expressly says it should do, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, the broken record point is that you say you're not happy with it because you don't think your opinion was taken into account. But our opinions can't always be taken into account fully or reflected in decision making. The point you don't dispute is that there has been consultation with all relevant parties. Do you?
No, I don't dispute that.
Thank you. Now, turning over then to 139, which you quote. Development that is not well designed should be refused. And then this, especially where it fails to reflect local design policies and government guidance on design, taking into account any local design guidance and supplementary planning documents, such as design guides and codes. Yes, so this part of the NPPF is stating that if the development is not well designed, it should be refused. And this is especially so if it fails to comply with an SPD, yes?
Yes, and in my approved paragraph 611, I acknowledge that this paragraph should be given very significant weight.
Thank you.
Determination of this appeal by the inspector.
Thank you very much. So you and I both agree then that the NPPF says that where it's not well designed and is in conflict with an SPD, it should be refused.
I don't think 139 says that, does it? 139 says where it fails to reflect local design policies, taking into account any local design guidance, doesn't it? So it isn't giving policy status to the design code or design guidance.
Policy statement, no, so it's the whole sentence. It's development that is not well designed. That's the first point.
Yeah, it should be refused.
Yes, it should be refused, especially where it fails to reflect local design policies and government guidance on design, taking into account
Taking into account.
any local design guidance and supplementary planning documents such as design guides and codes.
Yeah, so it's the policies. It's got to fail the policy, though, hasn't it? Not the. It's got to fail the policy because it isn't in accordance with the design code.
Well, so I don't think that I don't think it is read like that. I think the first thing is, of course, if it's not well designed, it should be refused.
Yeah,
that's your judgment.
Yeah.
But especially when it fails to reflect local design policies.
So that's the local plan.
Yes. Taking into account that, how do you take it into account? You obviously have to take into account the local design policies along with what the supplementary planning document does on design guides. So you can't disaggregate the design policy and not apply it in accordance with the design code or the SPD unless you're going to give no weight to the SPD.
I see. Yes. I see what you mean.
Thank you. I think that's quite important, Mr. Guthrie, just to get your view on that. Where development is not well designed, we all agree it should just be refused, right?
Agreed.
No problem with that.
No.
But it then explains, especially where it fails to reflect local design policies and government guidance on design, taking into account any local design guidance and supplementary planning documents such as design guides and codes. What I'm suggesting to you is that when you are looking at local design policies, if you're going to take into account SPDs, which seek to provide further guidance on the policies, you need to have, that includes then the guidance provided in the SPD, doesn't it, when you're interpreting local design policies?
Yes, may I go further, please, to answer the question? So then if you continue to read the paragraph, it says conversely, significant weight should be given to development.
Are we going to come to that? We're going to come
If I
to
can
that.
finish my answer, we have set out.
Mr. Guthrie, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you because you're answering a different question.
I think he's entitled to clarify his point.
Well, no.
I appreciate.
I think honestly, I'm very fair in my questions. I give you lots of time. Here, the question is simply to do with the first part, which is about refusal. And I'm asking you how you're going to interpret it.
Which we agreed yesterday, I believe, which is the role of an SPD, which is to provide detailed advice and guidance and not policy. So that must be read alongside paragraph 139 also.
Again, this isn't helpful, Mr. Guthrie. We're just trying to break through. I know that we've got this point, that you've said it several times, and no one's disputing that an SPD cannot be elevated to the status of a development plan policy.
Okay.
Right? So don't worry about that. I'm not going to say that you've agreed that because it would be wrong in law. I would not deliberately misguide the inspector here. Right? Okay. So that's fine. So you've said yes, and then you've said now, conversely, so this is no, you don't need to worry about restating your case here, but conversely, you say significant weight should be given to development that reflects local design policies and government guidance, including SPDs. Yes? So in other words, if you do reflect local design guides and SPDs, then you're going to be given what significant weight.
So can the quote be properly put? Which is again, it's not including, it's taking into account. And I think there is a difference. I think the wording should be properly put.
Well, if you think there's a difference between including and taking into account, by all means, answer the question again.
I will answer with respect to the question again. So we have set out we are in full compliance with the SPD, so significant weight should be given to that.
Yeah.
Is that
Mr. Guthrie, it will really help if you understand that I know what your case is. I know that you think that you've complied with everything. I'm just testing how this policy should be applied at the moment. Okay. All right. So all that we're looking at here is that when you're assessing local design policies, when you're assessing them, whether it's compliance or conflict, yes?
Yeah.
You will need to take into account whether there is compliance or otherwise with the SPD, which seeks to elaborate those design policies.
Agreed.
Thank you. Now, 139B confuses me from your evidence. This is dealing with outstanding and innovative design, yes?
Yes.
Now, you seem to be saying in your proof that you've provided innovative design. Are you standing by that as well? If so, can you explain how it's innovative?
So, in our discussions with Mr. Hammond during the pre-application stages and in conversation with the case officer, we sought to achieve the highest levels of design possible. I am not advocating design, that's the job of Mr. Hammond. However, the advice of Mr. Hammond during the determination process was not, to put in very layman's terms, to develop a grey standard industrial park. It was to seek what we could do to innovate our design, to blend in, mitigate our impacts as far as possible. And so we sought to work with the council throughout determination to deliver an innovative design, which is reflected as the advice by Mr. Hammond with the green facades and the design code that is secured as part of it.
Well, innovative design, in planning terms, outstanding and innovative usually means something that's original, it's creative, it's different in some way. You may be saying that your scheme has high design, obviously we don't agree with that, but you may be saying that, but you're not maintaining, I think, that your design is something very unusual. I mean, it is with greatest respect, a standard design for the type of development you're putting forward, isn't it?
I don't believe outstanding or innovative suggests unique necessarily.
I see.
Well, but the key point is the following question: does it promote high levels of sustainability, or would it help raise the standard of design more generally in the area? Which, the scheme, because that seems to be what it goes on to define outstanding and innovative in those. Well, it's not an absolute definition, it's a hint as to what it's
I think that's right. I think that's fair, yes.
So would you say that the scheme promotes high levels of sustainability or helps raise standards of design more generally in the area?
So I can answer the first point in terms of sustainability. Obviously, the local plan requires BREEAM very good as an obvious example, and we go to BREEAM excellent. So in terms of sustainability, there's a clear criteria there. In terms of raising standard design, that's a matter for Mr. Hammond. However, we were advised to seek to deliver an approach that would be of high design quality than other sites in the area.
Okay, and is high design quality the same as outstanding?
So that's for yourself.
Okay, well, then what's your view on it? I mean, you say we've provided high quality design. Does that mean, in your view, that you've provided outstanding design?
So in my professional experience, there are not many logistics schemes that have sought to mitigate their design in this way.
So is it outstanding? I mean, do you consider the design of this scheme to be outstanding design?
I would have to defer to Mr. Hammond on design.
Right, I don't think you've given an answer. Yeah, so okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, well, I think you've given the answer that you've given. Thank you for that. Right. Go to the SPD now, please. Itself. I mean, I think, and if I've got this wrong, just do tell me. Notwithstanding 630 of your proof, if you have that to hand.
I'm just going to get up the SPD.
Yeah.
It's
630, yeah. I mean, we discussed this a bit earlier, but I want to be sure that I'm fair and reflect this correctly. This is the bit where you say you consider the SPD should carry no weight in the determination of the appeal. And then you say, and as such, no specific design guide is deemed to apply. You see that?
Yes.
Now, you explained that you thought that you'd been a bit too rash with your no weight point. Do you also say that no specific design guide is deemed to apply? Or do you want to change that too now?
No, I'm happy to concede on that point and say that consideration should be given to the SPD.
Yes, thank you. So actually, we should rewrite that then, shouldn't we? So the SPD should carry limited weight, is what you want to say?
I'm happy with them.
Yes. And I agree that the SPD is a design guide that is deemed to apply.
That should be a material consideration decision.
Thank you. So that has to all be rewritten. So that 630 does not reflect his Mr. Duffy's actual evidence. Thank you for that. Right. So in that case, can we just look then at what the SPD does and whether you actually comply with it? And I've got your points that you don't like it, you don't think it's sound, you don't think that it should say what it says, but it is what we've got, and we've both agreed it's adopted and unchallenged, is a material consideration to which some weight should be given. Dispute between us how much weight.
Yes, I'm happy to agree with that.
Thank you. So let's look then at whether you comply with it or not. We've also looked at the relevance of that in the context of the NPPF, haven't we?
Yes.
Thank you. So let's have a look then at the SPD. So we've got the purpose of it set out at page 8. And it's been done externally, hasn't it, by Barton Wilmore? 1.11.
Yep.
Yep. And it's specifically, isn't it, to guide and support the future development of 4 of the 5 employment allocations, A1, AL1, 2, 4 and 5, AL1 being the one we're dealing with here.
Yes.
And then it talks at 1.12 about the purpose, which is to improve planning development process, providing clear guidance, robust development framework, also land uses, and then the last one, to raise design standards and overall quality of the development to create sustainable exemplary places which are functional and respond to their surroundings. Yes?
Yes.
We can see there's been community involvement. Yes?
Yep.
6 weeks consultation period in which you also participated with 3 in-person events.
Yes.
So fairly extensive. Then we've got all the plans showing where these various sites are. We can move on from there. We get to the planning policy context, page 18. And you see 2.1 makes it clear, doesn't it? Second paragraph section, second sentence. This SPD will be a material consideration in making and provides more detailed advice and guidance in line with the adopted policies and development plan. Yes?
It does.
So making clear that it is providing detailed advice and guidance in relation to those policies.
Yes.
Makes it clear 2.2 that it can't be elevated to a new planning policy. And we then have over the page reference to the part 2 local plan at 2.21. Yes.
Yes. May I provide comment on that?
If you want to.
So if you go to, this is where I fundamentally feel the SPD's role is maybe misunderstood.
Sorry, where are we going?
So
2.22. Oh, well, I'm on 2.22.
Okay, I'll have to address 2.22.
Yep, we can answer it in a moment. So in 2.22, we can see that the allocated sites in part 2 of the local plan are intended to, and you see, the last penultimate bullet point, meet the demand for small and medium-sized units. Yes?
That is the supporting text from the local plan.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well done. So we've got reference at 2.22 reflecting that text.
Yes, we do, yeah.
Thank you. Nothing wrong with that, is there? It's reflecting text that is meant to elaborate policy.
It's a copy and paste from the supporting text.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that, is there?
No.
Thank you. Then you wanted to say something about 2.24?
Yeah, so 2.24 says the full design briefs for 5 employment sites can be found in Appendix B as well as Part 2.
Yeah.
They are not design briefs, they are the policy wording. And I think that is a clear misunderstanding of in the SPD of how policy should be applied. They are how the application should be determined. They are not design briefs.
All right, well, we can have a look at those if we need to. We next get policy SS2, don't we? All set out there, very important policy.
Agreed?
Yeah, thank you. And then it tells us again, doesn't it, about the 2.26, the policy approach set out within the development plan sets out the context within which this SPD is produced, and again makes the point that it'll meet the demand for small and medium site units and contribute to reducing the level of out commuting. Yeah? And then 2.27 again just makes a comment about the general design principles and other matters. Contextual considerations is the next section. Nothing objectionable in that section, is there?
Well, if you would like me to elaborate, I'd be surprised in reading contextual considerations that AL3 is not a contextual consideration. So yes,
Sorry,
interesting that in developing the context of the SPD, AL3 is not considered
okay.
in that.
Thank you. All
Sorry, I
right.
didn't quite follow that.
No,
No.
I didn't actually.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. It doesn't.
So in consideration of
Yeah.
the surrounding context of building form, size, mass,
Yeah.
AL3, which was an approved development at the time of this SPD, which is referenced in the instruction, is not considered in the context.
And is the what's the relevance of that for this appeal?
So that is, if you are to read our SPD representations, that's as part of reasons as to why we have concerns over the preparation of an SPD that doesn't give consideration to an already allocated and already consented deployment. So AL3 is not drawn on this, the Maximus, and there are views taken and relied upon in the SPD document that would look straight through the AL3 site, for example.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And then we've got page 34, haven't we? Which is the Toaster Northern Gateways, which deals at 320 with AL1 and 2.
Yes.
And 3.21 talks about, again, the northern side of the roundabout belt plantation.
Yes.
Cluster of uses.
Yes.
Regularly used, visited by local residents, presenting an opportunity to introduce further provision. If delivered sensitively and in line with policy, this could see the delivery of some small, medium, and in exceptional circumstances, large development units. See that?
Yes.
Yes. So again, it is saying small and medium is likely, and in exceptional circumstances, large development units.
Agreed, that's what it says.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I know that you have got quite sort of exercised about the use of the word exceptional there, haven't you? It's been a feature of your case. But it's fair to say if one looks at this in a sensible manner, bearing in mind the emphasis that we've seen throughout the policy documentation, the explanatory text, this document, S2's emphasis on size, siting, massing, volume, all of these sort of points. What this is really saying, isn't it, when you look at this sensibly, that the type of development that is likely to meet those design principles, integrate, are going to be small and medium-sized buildings. That's what this is saying, isn't it?
I disagree.
Right, okay. Because it's going to be very exceptional circumstances that a large building is going to be acceptable on this site, or large buildings are going to be acceptable on this site and integrate properly, having regard to SS2. Surely that must be right.
So, John, you said very exceptional circumstances. It doesn't say very, it says exceptional. And as I set out earlier in my evidence in chief, we are unclear on what the test is for exceptional circumstances. We don't believe the SPD can introduce a policy test in exceptional circumstances. So whilst there is wording in there talking about exceptional circumstances, there is nothing preventing the delivery of large units. And when we read, I mean, we'll go forward and call it one. So
yes, we will. Thank you. Well, then there's preventing the delivery of large buildings, Mr. Guthrie. This is the problem. This is the bits of, with respect to the sort of wrong-headed approach that your team has taken. There is not preventing the delivery of large buildings. Policy AL1 itself, which talks about the need to have integrated with the local character, and compliance with SS2, which talks again about integration, size, scale, and massing relevant considerations. We've got the MPPF itself as well, which talks about the importance of these same matters. And then we have the inspector's report, we have the explanatory text to AL1. All of these factors, when looked at sensibly, demonstrate that it will be very, very rare for a large building of the type you're proposing, which by your own words maximizes the use of the site, that could ever meet those tests. That must be right, mustn't it?
So to go to the start of your question.
Yes or no first, and then go on.
No, there is nothing preventing the delivery of large buildings.
Not even the environmental design context.
Not provided you meet the tests of policy. Otherwise, there's nothing in any text policy text that suggests that large buildings of whatever height, there's no height either. Obviously, the SPD looks at a floor space. There's nothing that prevents the delivery of large buildings in policy, nor does the SPD prevent the delivery of large.
Other than the need to take into account scale, massing, integration, local character.
All development of any size, be it small, medium, or large, needs to take those elements into consideration.
Exactly, and it needs to integrate, doesn't it? And you have the evidence of the council, you have the evidence of Mr. Askew, which makes it clear that your buildings are simply too large.
I have to defer to the evidence to Mr. Hammond that we have appropriate design this development in consideration of those sensitivities.
But you accept, don't you, that this policy, SPD, is making clear or indicating that it's going to be small and medium-sized buildings that are likely to comply.
Could you repeat the question? You said policy and SPD.
The SPD is making clear that the supplementary planning document, isn't it, the SPD?
Correct.
Yes, we've gone through what that means and what it is, right?
Yes.
So the question here is, do you accept that the SPD is making clear that it is small or medium-sized buildings that are going to comply with the policy?
No.
Why not? That's what it says.
It provides. Should we go forward to AR1 framework?
Well,
now? Is that the
we
appropriate?
can do, once we've had a look at the words that I'm looking at. We're at paragraph 3.21.
Yes.
If delivered sensitively and in line with policy, so we're talking about AL1 policy there, yes?
Yes.
And we know the SPD is elaborating policy, or how it should be implemented anyway, yes?
Yeah.
In line with policy, this could see the delivery of some small, medium, and in exceptional circumstances, large development units. So it's small and medium that the focus is on, isn't it?
It doesn't say the focus. It says some, small, and medium. So you can read that in various different ways, and large. There's nothing in that wording that suggests a focus on small and medium.
I see. All right. Well, therein lies the problem, I think, Mr. Guthrie. I mean, your reading of it seems to be a deliberate attempt to not address the key import of this policy, which again, even on page 38, makes the same sort of point. Small, medium, and large unit sizes. Last para, the presumption will be for the accommodation across the employment sites of a mix of small, medium, and exceptional circumstances, large-sized units, as defined above. This will allow them to support, as the design brief states, a variety of employment types to reflect the need for diversity and resilience in the local economy. Again, the emphasis is on small and medium, I suggest to you.
It refers to large-size units delivering at a variety of employment types.
All right. Can we accept this then? If I'm right, that the reason that there's reference to small and medium is because that is what is considered likely to comply with AL1 and SS2 for the reasons that we've gone into. If I'm right that that's why there's a reference to small and medium, then your site is out of kilter with that.
I disagree with that statement. I think all of this context needs to look forward to the AR1 framework section. I think it's hard to read this part of the argument without going ahead. I keep finding it hard with respect to answer your question without going forward to that specific parts of AR1 which talk about circumstances in which large buildings can come forward.
In AL1?
In the AR1 part of the SPD, sorry.
Oh, you want to go to is this your brief point that you want to go to?
Yes, if we...
Yes, go ahead. I mean, I think, can I just put the question to make sure you've understood it properly and then answer it with reference to the brief if you want?
Yes.
My question to you is this, and I've taken you through SS2, I've taken you through to the inspector's report, I've taken you through to AL1, I've taken you through to the NPPF, I've taken you to various parts of the SPD.
Yeah.
And what I've explained to you the relevance of size and massing in integration and good design in that context. We've gone through all of that together.
Agreed.
So what I'm suggesting to you is if the reason that small and medium-sized buildings are referred to in this SPD is because that is what is considered to be consistent with good design and integration of AL1 development, then your scheme, which is clearly large and maximizes the use of the site, is out of kilter with that. And I have prefaced this by saying, if I'm right.
If you're right, yes. However, there is clear ability formed within the SPD for large buildings to come forward. If it was the intention of the SPD to prevent large buildings to come forward in their entirety, I would suggest that the text printed at 6.25 would not be there.
So you want to go to 6.25, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, let's go down.
You've got about 20 minutes, I understand.
That's fine, sir. 6.25.
Yes, I think probably the last part of that is the most appropriate. However, I'm happy to read the policy.
Now, let's tell me what you want to say. So remember you remember the question I put to you, that you're out of kilter if I'm right, and you said yes, but I want to go to 6.25.
If you're right, of course. However, my view is that the SPD states the circumstances in which large buildings can come forward. So the second half of this paragraph says large buildings which have a greater impact, i.e. are visible above tree cover, so not invisible, from longer distance views and affect the character of the area in which they sit, except there might be an effect on character, will need to provide robust mitigation such as delivering the highest design quality and through a program of landscape measures. So to me, there is nothing in there suggesting that large buildings cannot come forward. It is explicitly stating the circumstances in which they can.
Right. Is that your answer that's what you wanted to say about 6.25?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Guthrie, for explaining that. But, Mr. Guthrie, all of this SPD, I mean, this is your whole point, has to be read alongside or as part of explaining policy AL1, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's not a standalone policy that's your whole point. It's not a policy that stands alone, this SPD.
It's not a policy at all, it's guidance.
Exactly. It's a guidance, and it's a guidance of how we're going to interpret AL1, isn't it?
It should form part of the decision-making interpretation of AL1, depending on the weight to be attached to it.
Yes, so the answer is yes to my question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So whatever you read here has to be read alongside or as part of AL1, which refers to SS2, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So when you read about building height, scale, and massing here, together with everything else that's in this SPD, what you're being told is small and medium-sized buildings will be acceptable where there is no visual impact, likely arising to approximately 16 meters, yes?
Yes.
And it would be effectively screened from sensitive views and so on. So that would be a tick if you get a building that is screened and is around that height and is small and medium. Yes, that's what it's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it goes on to say large buildings which have a greater impact, i.e. are visible above tree cover from longer distances. Visible above tree cover from longer distances or affect the character of the area in which they sit, will need to provide robust mitigation, such as delivering the highest design quality and a thorough program of landscape measures. Right? Now that's not saying on its own you can have a large building. So ignoring everything else in the SPD and the AL1 and SS2, it's not saying you can just have a large building which is very visible above tree cover, as long as you provide robust mitigation. I mean that would be a wrong reading, wouldn't it, of the entire decision-making process.
As we both agreed, I think throughout, everything needs to be read aloud.
Thank you. And also, reading this sensibly, again, if a development is acceptable when it's entirely screened, it would be nonsensical to read this as meaning you can have a large building which isn't screened and that would be more acceptable or as acceptable as a building that is screened and is smaller. Be logical, wouldn't it?
Can you rephrase the question? Sorry.
Well, agreed that we have to read everything as a whole. That's what we just, rightly agreed that. And in the context of the policies, which are the main decision-making context. Just trying to read this sensibly, it would be nonsensical if this was saying that you can have large buildings which are not screened and which have a greater impact, and that they would somehow be as acceptable as a development that is small, medium-sized buildings which are entirely screened.
So, can you say what you think it means?
Yes,
and see whether Mr. Guthrie agrees with that.
So that's very helpful. Yes, I think that this, if you agree or don't agree, Lindsay, I think this is saying that small and medium-sized buildings will be acceptable as long as they are appropriately screened, or where there's no visual impact, sorry, that's the way it's put, no significant visual impact. And they've given a suggestion of what that would be, rising up to about 16 meters. So that is what is acceptable in accordance with this development framework. It's then picking up the point that is made earlier about the unlikelihood or the rarity, I put the word rare to you, or exceptionality that a large building would ever be acceptable because it's going to have greater impact. But it will be considered if it has robust mitigation, such as delivering the highest design quality and a thorough program of landscape measures as an exceptionality.
So what's the question, sorry?
That what this section is saying, or this paragraph is saying, perhaps it should have been better worded, but what it's saying is that 6.25, small, medium-sized buildings are what will be acceptable. And I'm saying to you that's consistent with everything else that's written in this SPD. All it's saying about large buildings is that if you do bring forward a large building, then it will have to be having robust mitigation, such as delivering the highest design quality and a thorough program of landscape measures. So it goes back, it harks back, doesn't it, to the other design tests of innovation, creativity, raising the design level, integrating nonetheless, because somehow it's got excellent design quality. That's what it's saying. It's saying that you'd have to really meet those higher tests if you're going to put forward something so large.
Yes, I think what it's saying is for small and medium buildings that you cannot see them, then effectively those impacts are kind of disregarded, I guess, to a degree. If you are visible, then you need to mitigate your impacts. But I think as we've touched on, it does accept there will be some, or could be, I should say, some level of visibility. And it's the evidence of Mr. Hammond from last week that says that our impacts are effectively mitigated. That's not for me to comment on diagrams and landscape.
Yeah, but that's not quite the way that I put it to you, though. I'm saying, so my suggestion is that when you read this SPD together with all the policies and understand the national planning policy context as well, what it's saying is that you will have, on this site, on this consolidated site, building height, scale and massing will be acceptable for small and medium-sized buildings. That's what I'm putting to you first.
Provided they are effectively screened.
All right, and from sensitive views and so on, yes, right. So this is going down into the detail now. If you can produce a building like that, that will be acceptable on this site.
Subject, of course, to meeting all the other tests. I think both halves of the policy need to be read entirely as a whole. I think if you were to take that as something being acceptable, that would be wrong, of course.
I think there's probably not a huge amount of disagreement between you, so please don't start finding it. I think you agree, and anyway, it's small and medium buildings, so right. But what do you say about large buildings then, Ms. Shank?
And so for large buildings, that if you exceptionally are, like if a large building is exceptionally going to be found to be acceptable, then it will have to be of a delivering the highest design quality, which harks back to SS2, harks back to the MPPF, and of course a program of landscape measures. So it is making clear that you're going to look at a scheme that comes forward that is large, but then it has to meet those tests. It is an exceptional situation that a large building will be acceptable on this site. That's what I'm putting to you. That's what that second part is.
I think not to be difficult, apart from the exceptional bit, which I think I put forward my case, I agree with the wording which is in here, which says about highest quality design, landscape measures, etc. That's not a matter of screening. Of course, we have to meet those. Yeah.
Highest design quality and a thorough program of landscape measures. So you read this in complete isolation to the rest of the SPD.
SPD, development plan, everything must be read as a whole.
Yes.
I think we're in agreement.
Well, I'm not sure we are. I think we've agreed with the first part, possibly. But what I'm suggesting to you is the second paragraph here has to be read along with everything else that's said in the SPD and the policy context that we've looked at, the development plan policy context.
Yep.
It can't be read. You can't just take this section out and decide that it means that large buildings will be acceptable as long as you have your landscape measures and you decide that they are of the highest design quality.
No, of course, no, I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And then if I can just ask you to deal with the highway issue very briefly. I don't want to get into great detail. We've had cross-examination of Mr. Anderson. Paragraphs 115 and 116, which have been referred to by, in your examination in chief. If you could just turn to those. It said that everyone can rest assured and be happy because 115D talks about significant impacts being mitigated through a vision-led approach, and that subsequent developments will go through that process. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you also remember, I mean, you've been sitting here, that National Highways has responded in relation to the other AL site and said that there will be no mitigation required?
Yes.
Thank you. So that's the document that you had.
Yeah.
And 116, it's agreed between the parties, we've had the evidence, that in 2031 there will be severe residual cumulative impacts on the road network.
I'm not sure that is agreed. There will be an impossible.
Well, I think that.
I think it was potential.
Well, no, potential, I think, is what National Highway said. I think Mr. Anderson agreed that the 5 minutes could be regarded as severe.
It was potential. I think it was
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, I don't need to take up time on this. I mean, if a great deal.
Potentially severe.
Yeah, all right. If a great deal sits on that word potential in the context of the evidence that we have, I'm happy with that. Let's add in potential. All right. So if there is a potential based on your modelling for there to be an unacceptable cumulative or severe residual cumulative impact on the road network, then the issue there is whether or not the inspector agrees with the council's approach or your approach. That 116 is resolved in that way, isn't it?
So I think it needs to be read in the context of taking into account all future reasonable scenarios which are realistic. Yes. And of course, our case of Mr. Anderson is that realistic in this instance would not be a series of unmitigated AL sites.
Yeah, you're repeating your case again. So I think the point that I'm simply putting to you is the question about the policy application of 116 depends on which whose case the inspector agrees with.
Sorry, yes, of course.
Thank you. So I won't ask you anything more about that. And then just in looking at the sort of policy context then, overall, we're agreed, Mr. Guthrie, from our discussion here, that primacy is with the development plan, yes?
Yes.
And the appeal needs to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the development plan, we've gone through the policies, you've accepted and agree that AL1, SS2, and the other policies we've referred to are all up to date.
Yes.
Yeah. The SPD must be given material weight. Thank you. The SPD generally promotes, I suggest to you, small and medium sites, and yours is not a small and medium site, is it?
Our site does not exclusively, it does have small and medium units on it, but it's primarily large units.
Thank you. And if the inspector, as I will be submitting, gives the SPD full weight and agrees that it is outlining small and medium sites as appropriate in terms of AL1, then your site would be in conflict with that policy, with the SPD.
No, as set out, I disagree with that.
No, let me put it to you again. If the inspector agrees that the SPD is advising that small and medium sites are what would be appropriate on AL1, then your site would be out of kilter with that.
If the inspector considers that the SPD is seeking to provide small and medium only, then yes.
And if small and medium sites are what the SPD is advising would be appropriate in the circumstances, then your site would be out of kilter with that.
If the inspector considers that the SPD is seeking to only promote small and medium.
Right. And if the SPD, if you're in conflict with the SPD, then the NPPF says that is something that should weigh against your scheme.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, the evidence of Mrs. Ford refers to several other policies in the development plan, and which aren't cited in the reason for refusal. You recall that?
Yes.
You haven't made any comments about those, and I'm not going to ask you about those, but the inspector has those in Mrs. Ford's evidence. And if the inspector considers them to be relevant, you're not suggesting he should ignore those, are you?
No, the inspector must read the development plan as a whole. It was not in my evidence, it was not in Miss Ford's evidence either, but all those policies, when read together, all provide significant weight in favour of determining this account.
Yeah.
Allowing this account, I should say.
Yeah, I think it's just a simple, I think it was being suggested yesterday, although not quite put to Mrs. Ford, that they're not mentioned in the reason for refusal, but that doesn't mean that they could not, that they should not be relevant for the inspector.
Other matters can be considered.
Thank you. And they're still part of the development plan, as you say. Thank you. Thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mr. Benjamin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly an hour and 20 minutes. Thank you. Okay, let's take a break until 22 12 by actually they're both the same.
So just to go back, Ms. Gavitt, you're in Perth at the moment. Yeah, we'll all be very cheap.
Yes, yes. You guys go.
Right, okay, we'll make a start, please. Over to you, Mr. Edmund Jones.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Guthrie.
Good morning.
So some of my questions have been asked already, so I will try to keep my questions to points that haven't already been dealt with between you and Mrs. Shea. First of all, though, I just wanted to pick up one point, which I think Ms. Shafer was getting at, but I just wanted to be clear about it with you myself, in relation to policy and your discussion with my learned friend of paragraph 6.25 in the SPD and your emphasis on the second sentence in that paragraph. We don't need to go around the houses on it all again, but I do want to just, I mean, you'll be very familiar with the principles of policy interpretation and Tesco and so on, won't you? And you know that policy statements need to be interpreted objectively. You said as a whole, I mean, that's a version of this, but objectively in their proper context. Yeah.
Just to be clear, this is guidance, not policy, but yeah.
Well, no, indeed, but this has to be related to the context of the policy in the local plan too, doesn't it?
Okay.
And we do see in local plan 2, my learned friend went through them with you, the repeated references to small and medium-sized buildings or units, don't we?
In the supporting text
To the policy, not this SPD.
yes.
And so the concept for this paragraph 6.25 in the SPD, if you like, traces back to that context and that policy as you've been yourself making the point. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. So this section 6.25 needs to be read in that context, albeit that it's guidance and not policy, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Now, I'm going to go through with you the points on spatial strategy and settlement hierarchy, which obviously was were not points that were gone through with my own friend, because it forms part of, say, Taste and Now's case rather than the council's. You'll remember the discussion that was had between Mr. Tucker and the planning witnesses on Wednesday in relation to these matters. So first of all, if we can go to the joint core strategy and start with policy S1, which is at 27 of the JCS.
Yes.
And it's core document 40.01. And hopefully these points aren't going to be controversial, but I just want to run through them with you. We know that policy S1 is the distribution of development for West Northamptonshire as of the point at which the JCS was adopted, yes?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, we know that it's going to, so development will be primarily concentrated around Northampton, yeah, in A.
Yes.
Yeah, and then appropriate development of a slightly lesser scale or a lesser scale will be located in the sub-regional centre of Daventry, and that's B, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then we get the rural service centres of Toaster and Brackley, and we know that development will be distributed on the basis of the development needs of those rural service centres, and that's C, isn't it?
That's what it says, yes.
Yeah. And then D is not relevant to us, but goes into the rural areas, yeah?
Yes.
Good. And then in terms of Toaster itself, the policy is T1. So I do want to go to S8, but let's just jump ahead to look at Toaster briefly. That's page 185. It's 188 in the PDF, I believe. Yeah. So this is where we get the policy, the spatial strategy for Toaster. And we see that the role of Toaster as a rural service centre will be supported and enhanced by the following development and other proposals. And we see there in that policy that there are several categories of development, but we know that the B is the one that covers employment development. Yeah,
It does, yes.
And at that stage, I appreciate that this is in 2014 and we've got policies that come later, but at that stage, there's no indication of strategic employment locations for warehousing or that type of development.
This policy makes no reference to any employment development outside of the town centre.
Yeah.
And outside of this disabled exemption. So
yeah, and so we know that changes obviously as we
so
move forward.
policy is superseded as such by
Well, it's not so much superseded, it's just that the following, the local plan 2 deals with the detail in terms of what might come forward. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just be clear, just as a factual point, somebody said, I think the other day, I think it may have been Ms. Greg, that the sustainable urban extension policy includes for employment.
Yeah.
I suppose I can easily check that myself. Is that the case? It does. So there is some employment there as well.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right. And at this stage, that was what was proposed by way of employment.
Yeah. So that was all that was envisaged at this stage.
Yeah.
When it comes to the part 2 plan, that's included the employment in Joseph South and also then the AM.
And then the new allocations, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Now, in terms of, sorry, I said we were going to jump about, we've done T1, so I just want to go back now to S8. And first of all, before we get to S8, I just want to look at the context in terms of the distribution of jobs. So paragraphs 5.57 onwards. This is the supporting text now.
Yes.
And we're at page 47 in my PDF, which is page 44. So we've got a sort of setting out in the supporting text here of the strategy that we've looked at already in distribution of jobs. But we get to at 559, which is on the top of page 45, a discussion of South Northamptonshire, which is described as a largely rural district that struggles with the level of out-commuting and has a low job density. See that? And then South Northamptonshire, sorry, I don't know why I keep saying that. South Northamptonshire in its economic development strategy, which is to address the issue of out-commuting and the impact this has on the sustainability of its urban and rural settlements. See that? Yeah. So we're dealing here with the issue of out-commuting, and obviously that's been a recurring topic in this inquiry, and it's an important issue, isn't it? And it's being addressed here in this paragraph. Yeah. Yeah, and then the final sentence: South Northamptonshire therefore needs to address the level of out-commuting by providing employment opportunities which meet the professional profile of their resident workforce. Yeah. Yeah. And here it's, I think it's fair to point out, this is dealing with the South Northamptonshire district as a whole in this paragraph, at least.
That paragraph is dealing with South Northamptonshire district in 2014.
Yeah. And then we go on in 560 to deal with Northampton, 561 to deal with Daventry. See that? Yeah. And then at 562, we get South Northamptonshire will experience a fall in its labour force due to an ageing population, and therefore its job requirements are likewise affected. But to reverse trends of out-commuting, the district is seeking to support its existing high-performance engineering technologies and motorsport clusters, and support further growth in home working and leisure and tourism supported by University Technical College. So the emphasis there is on high tech sectors and obviously Silverstone and so on, isn't it?
That text does say that, yes.
Yeah, it's relating it to the issue about commuting still.
Yes, but as there are some things, it's not exclusively saying that's how the district should address those issues.
No, I didn't say that, but we are dealing here with South Northamptonshire, and the previous paragraphs deal with Northampton and Daventry. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Now, again, we come to S8, which is the policy itself, and we see that the majority of new job growth under 1 will be concentrated within the principal urban area of Northampton, and then we have a series of locations and criteria set out there. Yes. Yep. And we know that there are some large-scale employment sites planned. For example, the allocation of a strategic employment site at the M1 Junction 16.
Yeah, I think the evidence of Mr. Bricknell has established other sites over 14 or
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I wasn't dealing specifically with the issue of strategic in the context of planning or warehousing, but just noticing that there is a big allocation there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of Daventry, we've got number 2 setting out again the same, and we've got dirt setting out at sea there, haven't we? The large employment allocation.
Yes.
Yeah. And then finally, we come at 3 to employment provision within South Northants, and we get the list of the items that are proposed for that area of the district. Yeah.
Yes, however, of course, notably doesn't include the ALs in this.
No, it doesn't include the ALs, and it doesn't include at this point, at least, any sort of strategic location for employment, does it?
No, not in that text.
No. Good. And we know, I don't think we need to go to it, we can just notice it and move on. We know that policy S10, which is also relevant, particularly when we're considering the design and landscape policies and so on. S10 requires that developments protect, conserve and enhance the natural and built environment. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Now, policy E1, which I think was a policy that the inspector actually referred to last week and we haven't been to since, is at page 87, the JCS. Which I think is page 19 in the PDF. Just make sure that's right. Yeah, so existing employment areas, policy E1.
Yes, and that, thank you.
Now, again, we've got a series of policies, a series of paragraphs, sorry, and we get at the bottom detailed implementation of the policy will be through the party local plans. So we know that that flows through into LP2 and so on, doesn't it?
Yep.
And we can see in the third paragraph that new commercial floor space at the rural service centres of Toaster and Brackley and other smaller settlements will be of a scale that is commensurate with their function. Yeah.
Yes, I'd just like to add a point there, if I may. I feel it's a slightly clumsily written policy. The supporting text, for example, at 8.5 says many existing employment sites are undergoing redevelopment. Sorry, yeah, of course. Sorry. So I'll just start from the top. I feel like it's a slightly clumsily written bit of policy, so the interpretation is quite up for debate, especially given the date of the policy. The supporting text, if we are to read that for context, 8.5 in the middle starts with many existing employment sites are undergoing redevelopment, etc., etc. The title of the policy then also says existing employment areas. If you then go to the third paragraph, it says new commercial floor space at the rural service centre. So I would say that is referring to those existing employment areas and new commercial floor space within those existing employment areas. It's not referring to new allocations, etc. It's referring to existing employment areas and how development should be brought forward within those. So I'm not sure it applies to development. It's existing employment areas, not new employment areas. But
yeah, I mean, I think we can agree it's perhaps clumsily worded. I mean, it is an existing employment area, isn't it? I mean, it's just a rural service centre rather than a larger centre like Northampton. It's still they're both employment areas. It's just what is the scale or what's appropriate to them. That's the issue, isn't it?
My reading of the policy is referring to existing employment designation land, etc., not a new employment allocation and stuff. That's my reading of the policy, but I accept that it could be read differently. I would not expect a policy like this to get through a local plan. It's quite hard to interpret.
You've got a lot of faith in the more local plan inspector. Anyway.
Well, I mean, I'm going to suggest that the interpretation I would suggest is the better one, because precisely because the third paragraph says new commercial floor space at the rural service centres of Toaster will be of a scale that is commensurate with their function. It's not referring to allocations or particular sites or particular spaces. It's in fact referring to new commercial floor spaces at those centres, isn't it?
for the purpose of this, I'm happy to go with that.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now, just in terms of the
And just to follow on that one, because I was specifically raised that E1 originally, didn't I? And I'm wondering now whether I, having thought about it further, read it correctly. So, but if I can, it would be, let me put it this way, it would be illogical to say that for a plan to say, as an existing employment site in Toaster, you can only have something that is commensurate with Toaster's function. But you can allocate new sites that aren't commensurate with Toaster's function. That would just be illogical, wouldn't it?
No, that's a fair interpretation.
Thank you, sir. Now, just before we leave this and the JCS, if you look at just down page, this is a section dealing with office development, and I appreciate that isn't what your deal is seeking to deliver. But 8.9 again refers specifically, so we've got 8.8 dealing with Daventry, and 8.7 dealing with Northampton, but 8.9 deals with Toaster, doesn't it? And it says Toaster and Brackley provide service centre roles and are not sustainable locations for strategic scale up with this development, as they do not have the extent of resident population to support employment growth on a large scale, resulting in incommuting and unsustainable patterns of travel. However, new office development of an appropriate scale to support their economies and help alleviate out commuting to larger centres. I mean, it is fair to say in relation to this paragraph, I appreciate it's dealing with office development and not warehousing or storage and distribution type development. But it is fair to say that the discussion here of in-commuting and out-commuting refers to Toaster and Brackley themselves and not just the district level. Well, not just, but it's not speaking at the level of the district in this paragraph, is it?
Is the question is just referring to Toaster and Brackley, sorry?
Yeah, but it's specifically the in-commuting and out-commuting issue. I mean, there's a reference to both in this paragraph, but it's this discussion in this part of the JCS is dealing with the town level, not the district level, isn't it?
For office development only, as per the subtitle, and it's supporting policy E2, new office floor space.
Yeah, it's by reference to office development, but the issue of in-commuting and out-commuting can relate to any type of employment. I appreciate that office development is of a greater density, so it might have a greater magnitude as an issue in relation to office development. But the point here is just that it's talking about the town level rather than the district level.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I think we can move to the local plan 2 then. And again, I'm just for everyone, I'm not covering all of the bits that it's already been through, so just going through the bits that we need to, that we haven't already gone to, hopefully. But here, just before we get into the local plan 2, just want to touch on the inspector's report in relation to local plan 2, which there's been a lot of discussion, clearly. Now, in your proof of paragraph 2.39, yes, you say, I mean, first of all, at 2.38, you set out a paragraph from the inspector's report, I think, at 238. Is that from the inspector's report?
128. Yeah.
So sorry, 2.38.
Yes, that's a paragraph 128 from the inspector's report.
Yeah. Now, just the next statement that you make in 2.39, the above read alongside the inspector's report in full clearly demonstrates appropriate considerations given to the allocation of the site role. We can agree with that happened. And to its potential use for large book built forms to accommodate logistics and or commercial uses. I mean, that's overstating it, isn't it? We don't find any reference to the potential for large book built form, do we, in the inspector's report of relevant parts of it from paragraph 84 onwards, do we?
No, I'm happy to accept that it doesn't explicitly state large floor plate built forms, however, it does state flexible use of land alongside growth in logistics and distribution centre, distribution sector, which needs to be opportunity driven within the Golden Triangle. So I will accept that I've probably read between the lines there.
Thank you. Now, I mean, isn't this becoming a bit of a pattern, isn't it? Because you've already agreed various inaccuracies or overstatements with my own friend, haven't you?
We discussed the SPD.
Yeah, so but there are a number of exaggerations, we can put it benevolently, in your statements where you overstate them.
I'm likely to accept that I have conceded on a number of my points.
Okay, well, it's not a minor point, is it? Potential for large plate build form. I mean, if the inspector had explicitly considered that, that would be very good for you, wouldn't it? And the inspector doesn't say that, does it?
I will accept that there is no reference directly to large floor plate build forms.
Yeah, and let's be clear. I mean, size is a critical issue in this appeal. Yeah. It's not a minor issue.
I mean, there's no, as far as my reading of it, there's no reference to any size of building, is there?
No.
There's no reference to the size of the building.
Indeed, so and that's the point. Thank you.
There's no comment on it.
Thank you. So, but sticking with the report, if you got that open,
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Again, I'm not going to go over bits that my own friend went over with you, particularly paragraph 107, relating specifically to AL1, but just on the issue again of out commuting and jobs. Paragraph 97 deals with these issues, doesn't it? And it says, the inspector says that whilst unemployment is low in the district, job density is also low, indicating that a significant proportion of South Northamptonshire's working age population commute to other areas for work. On this basis, the economic assessment, etc., recommends that strategies should be pursued to increase the number of jobs in the district so that its resident population can remain within it for work and increase spending in its settlements, leading to improved vitality and viability. And then again, we get the explicit reference to the JCS that we've just been to, saying that the JCS recognises the level of out commuting needs to be addressed through providing employment opportunities which meet the professional profile of the resident workforce. Yeah, see that? So we see that this traces the inspector's analysis here traces directly from the concerns that were already present in the JCS.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. And here it's, again, to be fair, this is referring to out commuting at the district level, isn't it?
Oh, on a district level, yes.
Good. Now, 98 is also relevant, and that deals with the compelling basis to allocate sites to provide additional and flexible opportunities that will encourage sustainable economic growth. Now, your point on this, I think, again, inferring from Mr. Tucker's questions and your proof, is that the flexible opportunities to encourage, or the additional and flexible opportunities include what is proposed by this appeal scheme.
Yes, absolutely, which is exactly what the MPPF seeks and policies to do. They seek them to be flexible enough to respond to changing economic circumstances. So the policy is in full accord to what it should be doing. Sure,
but what AL1 tells us, we know that there should be a mix of employment types. Yeah, so it's also consistent with the position, certainly that Save Taste now takes, and I think the council agrees with to some as well, which is that there should be a mix of employment types, ideally, on this site. And as you know, well, as we know, 96.5% B8 that's proposed, isn't it?
Policy AL1 seeks for mixed employment generating development across the 35 hectares of AL1, which would include the government plantation scheme. There is mixed employment. If you want to nip it slightly on our site, it's limited, but if you include AL1 as a whole, there is certainly mixed employment development across the site.
Yeah. Now, just on AL1 as a whole, we talked about the 75-25 split. You were here on Wednesday, weren't you, when I think Mr. Weeks was setting out that there could be a mix of up to, or rather the mix might be different, it might be up to 89.2% B8, when the 50% parameters, yeah, so it could be much more an even more imbalanced distribution, couldn't it?
If I could comment on that, mixed employment generating development, there can be various uses within.
Just before you do, could you just answer my question, which was that there could be an even greater imbalance between the two if it's 89.2% versus 11% or thereabouts?
There could be a higher proportion of B8s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I
please finish my point here? So the answer I gave earlier was large floor plate versus smaller floor plate. So 75% can be large floor plate, 25% can be small floor plate. That wasn't saying B8 or not B8. B8 is a very broad use class. I think that's been kind of evidence in kind of what DHL do inside their buildings, what an Every might do inside their buildings, what a Carden might do inside their buildings. It's a very broad use class, and small units will do a very different type of employment generation development. So even if Mr. Weeks' position whereby you might have a higher level of B8, that would still be a very mixed use development, because you have a variety of different units of different scales across the site.
Yes, and the point about that though is that the DHL site is the much larger site, and if there was a greater mix of smaller and medium-sized units across AL1 rather than just on the smaller part of the Bell Plantation site, you're more likely to get a greater diversity of different employment opportunities, aren't you, and possibly greater number of jobs as well.
So I defer largely to the evidence of Mr. Brooks, but obviously the evidence of Mr. Brooks, the market assessment says 80% large floor plate and 20% smaller floor plate. If we are to meet that 80%, that needs to be met.
Well, we discussed that with Mr. Brooks, and we don't need to go back over that evidence. Obviously, I put to him that that he was delivering what his assessment delivers is a justification for the need for B8. And within that, he justifies a strategic warehousing scale as well. There are other potential needs, which he said he admitted to me or conceded to me that he wasn't seeking to analyse or address in his report. He was rather looking at what the demand is for what this development proposes.
That's a question for Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, well, we went over that last
And that's not quite my recollection of his answer, in fairness to that.
Yeah, no, I recall, I've got my own view on this. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can make suggestions on that. Thank you. So, just returning then to paragraph 98. It continues in these ways. The local, are you there? Sorry, the inspector's report. Yes, sorry, paragraph 98 of the inspector's report. Just want to finish off this point. In these ways, the local, so we're onto the second sentence. In these ways, the local plan 2 plans proactively to meet development needs of business and support an economy fit for the 21st century, supports existing business sectors and identifies and plans for emerging sectors likely to locate in the area. Plans positively for the location, promotion and expansion of clusters or networks of knowledge-driven, creative or high-tech industries. Now, the point there is that as well as B8 or as well as strategic warehousing type uses of the sort that's being proposed in this scheme, there's also the hope and expectation that's being discussed here by the inspector and is also present in the policy AL1 for a greater diversity of different types of clusters, networks of knowledge-driven, creative or high-tech industries. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we will see that traced through, won't we, when we come to the NPPF as well? Yeah.
There's reference to that amongst freight logistics, supply chain, other matters in the NPPF.
Yeah, good. Now, back then, please, to the local plan 2. A lot of the relevant parts of the supporting text have already been gone to the piece, so I don't need to go through all of it with you. But given the themes that we're picking up, or that I've been picking up with you, can we just go to 13.1.3, first of all, please?
Yes.
And here we get policy S1. This is obviously the discussion of the policy that we've already been to in the JCS, sets out the overarching distribution of development for West Northants. Generally, development will be concentrated in and adjoining the principal urban area of Northampton. Yeah, we've seen that.
Yes.
Already. Appropriate development of a lesser scale in Daventry. Yeah.
Yes.
The development needs of the rural service centres of Toaster and Brackley will also be provided for.
Yes.
Yeah. And then policy S8 relates to the distribution of jobs and states that the majority of new job growth will be concentrated around Northampton and Daventry. Beyond those areas, employment allocations at a scale of 40 hectares or below should be considered positively during the preparation of local plan, Part 2 local plans. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's what this is doing, isn't it? This is one of the Part 2 local plans, isn't it?
correct, yes.
But it's the next bit's important, isn't it? Where they comply with the objectives of the broad joint core strategy alongside fulfilling local priorities and considerations. Yeah?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. And in 13.1.4, you get the additional important text about this allocation, these allocations, that additional employment land has been allocated in order to facilitate more local employment growth. Yeah?
Yes.
And it aims to attract new investment and provide more jobs to match the skills of local people, thereby balancing the ratio of in and out commuting. Yeah?
Yes.
So again, we've got the themes here are local jobs, local people. I'm not suggesting this is the only consideration here, so don't misunderstand me, but just focusing on these paragraphs.
That's fine.
And the balancing of the ratio of in and out commuting. And again, this is at the district level that the discussion is taking place here, isn't it? But within the context of a taster policy.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. I think we've been to most of the other parts of the supporting text, so I don't want to, given the time we've got, I don't want to go back over
About 10 minutes.
all of those, yeah. Policy AL1, briefly then, because we know it quite well by now, but we'll just go to it. Now, we know in paragraph 1, I mean, just sticking with the policy points I'm putting to you, and I've been taking you to in this topic area. Paragraph 1, the key passage for these purposes is the end, isn't it? A variety of employment types will be sought to reflect the need for diversity and resilience in the local economy, as expressed in the Council's economic growth strategy. So that comment or sentence tracks back, doesn't it, to all the comments I've been taking you to, or to the policies, the distribution, the spatial strategy, the settlement hierarchy, and what's being intended or directed for Toaster at this site.
Yes, and obviously, of course, has to be read alongside the economic growth strategy, be up the 2016 to 19 or be up to date 2024, which all talks about logistics being a key driver of the South Northampton Western Coast.
Yeah, I mean, it mentions that, of course, it refers to logistics. I mean, it would be very odd if it didn't. It also refers to other industries and sectors, doesn't it? Yeah. So the inspector will look at those and he'll see, he'll read them for himself. And I wouldn't dispute that logistics mentioned. But again, we've got the diversity and resilience that we are looking for reflected in that economic growth strategy as well.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Now, we know about policy SS2. I'm not going to go to that because my own friend covered that in some detail with you. And similarly, we've got my own friend went through the SPD with you in some detail. But I do want to just touch on. You'll remember, won't you, that there's reference both in the JCS supporting text to policy. I believe. Let me just check. I think it's, remember the reference to the balanced economy. It's under warehousing, so I think it's paragraph 5.71, I believe. I can't remember the page on the top of my head. I think it's 40, no, 48, there you are. Just want to note that paragraph, if you can get there.
Yes, and I think
If you've got that. So you remember the statement in that paragraph that the area remains attractive to the warehouse industry, and indications are that it was likely to remain so for the lifetime of the plan. See that?
yes.
And however, delivering new space to cater for the warehousing sector on a trend-based trajectory would not be desirable nor sustainable in the long term in order to achieve a balanced economy.
Yeah, so I'd rather just like to expand on that Mr. Brooks covered this in his evidence.
Yeah, so we don't need, I mean, by all means, say what you need to say, but obviously we don't need to go back over his evidence. But I just wanted to note this before we get to the SPD reference.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Then the point being that this is obviously 2014, and I appreciate there are points that sometimes made about this being more than 10 years old. But if we go to the employment, the SPD briefly on this point, can we go to 2.15, paragraph 2.15?
Yeah.
You're not.
Yes.
And we see there the same reference, don't we? Obviously, it's referring back to the JCS, but it's still highlighted as being relevant and applicable in 2022 when the SPD was adopted. Yeah.
Yeah, that's effectively lift the text from the
Yes.
professional.
Yeah. Thank you. And that is part of the point here, though, isn't it, Mr. Guthrie, that there are two competing issues around economic growth here. One would be you deliver economic growth. This is a big scheme. It should be granted permission. We can come to the MPPF shortly. But the other might be that there is a need for economic growth to be delivered, and it needs to be delivered in a balanced way. And that's why we have plans setting out spatial strategies which seek to put strategic level warehousing in certain locations, and then other types which encourage a mix of employment types in other locations. Yeah, there are two competing strategies for economic growth here, aren't there, in play potentially?
Well, I think if I could just expand on my point, so obviously the policy says to have an independent.
So can you just answer my question first? There are two competing approaches to economic growth, aren't there? Is that fair?
Could you repeat the question just so I can?
Well, one approach to economic growth would say that you grant permission for massive scale sites like this because you're trying to seek economic growth, volumes, importance, and so on and so forth. And now there would be the balanced economy approach, which is that you try to, through planning and your spatial strategy and your settlement hierarchy, locate particular types of development in particular locations. And we know that we've got strategic locations for employment growth by the M1. We know that we've got them at DER. The location proposed here is AL1, and the mix, it's encouraging a mix of employment types rather than a strategic scale warehousing site. So I'm saying that there are two different approaches. Your approach is one approach, and there's another approach, which seems to be the one that's adopted through the policy.
So the local plan approach is obviously to deliver mixed employment generation development. That doesn't exclusively say that each site must deliver an entire mix of offices, manufacturing, warehouses. It's
not that each site must, it's just that AL1 should.
AL1 is delivering a mixed employment generation development. It might be delivering warehousing under B8, it might be delivering some B2, and red as a whole. Industrial.
No, that's fair, but we know that your site is delivering 96.5% B8 of a very large scale.
Our proposal is delivering a higher proportion of B8, yes.
Good, okay, thank you. Well, I think at least we know the difference. Good, now just one more reference in the SPD before we move to the MPPF, and so I hope we can have time to deal with the MPPF because I do need to just make a few extra points that weren't discussed with my own friends. So I'll do it as quickly as I can.
Yeah, please, as quick as you can.
Yeah, just one.
Very fair on everybody else.
No, I understand. So
it will be in their time.
I do understand.
Needs to go through examination.
Yeah. So 2.21, just wanted to note the reference to the local plan in line with the joint core strategy. This is in the SPD. So
Yes.
In line with the joint core strategy, the Part 2 local plan allocates additional employment and to facilitate more employment growth, local employment growth. The aim is to attract new investment and provide more jobs to match the skills of local people. That's balancing the ratio of in and out commuting. So we see again that's noted, don't we, in the SPD.
We do, and the skills match was addressed by Mr. Brooks in his evidence last week.
Yeah. And we won't go through that again. And I'm not going to deal with small, medium, large exceptionality because my own friend went through all of that with you. Just want then to turn to the MPPF. We may just draw out a couple of points in relation to this. So I'm talking about paragraphs 85 to 87. Got that? I'm not. So again, if we can look at paragraph 85 first.
Yep.
So planning policies and decisions should help create the conditions in which businesses can invest, expand and adapt. Significant weight should be placed on the need to support economic growth and productivity, taking into account both local business needs and wider opportunity for development. Now, it's been put, I think, by the appellant and Mr. Tucker in his questions at various points on behalf of the appellant, that the emphasis of Safe Taster now is unduly or myopically focused on local business needs. But a point that we make actually is made at paragraph 9.45 of Mr. Weeks' proof, for example, is not actually that there's a sole focus on local business needs, but rather that the strategic scale warehousing of the type that the appeal scheme is proposing is provided for within the local plan at these other destinations along the M1 and so on. And so those wider opportunities for developments have been provided for, have been planned for within the plan policies, haven't they?
So the need point for this type of development was addressed by Mr. Brooks last week. I believe the need is 1.9. Yeah, sorry, the supply is 1.9. So I think it's a point for Mr. Brooks there.
Okay, but bearing in mind that need, that could still be located at some of the strategic scale sites, couldn't it? I mean, that need could be met. Sorry, at those other locations.
It's one for Mr. Brooks.
Okay, right. Well, we won't go into that then. And I covered that with Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks. Okay, so 86 then. We know in relation to stepping to C, planning policies should pay particular regard to facilitating development to meet the needs of a modern economy, and then again, including identifying suitable locations for uses such as laboratories, factories, data centres, digital infrastructure, freight and logistics. Now, we know your scheme obviously seeks to provide for freight and logistics, yeah, logistics in particular.
Yes.
Yeah, but it doesn't seek to provide. I mean, we already went through this, but laboratories or R&D, it doesn't provide for any of those other things, does it?
Not. It's obviously such as, so it's not an exclusive list of
No,
course. You have to go forward to modern economy, including. But no, there's no laboratory, no big factory, no data centers, no digital infrastructure.
But again, this is relevant, isn't it, when we refer back to AL1 and we look for the aim of the policy, which is seeking a mix of employment types. Yeah.
Yes, I believe that.
Well, no, but it's important in terms of the MPPF. What the MPPF is seeking, you rely on paragraph 86, and you say that it changes the whole picture.
So you have to read paragraph 86, obviously, as a whole. And paragraph C, if we go down to, for example, part E, which said to be flexible to accommodate needs not anticipated in the plan and allow for new flexible working practice, that's not particularly relevant. To enable a rapid response to change in economic circumstances. So then if you go back to policy AL1, which drives for a market evidence need of B1, B2, B8, which covers the vast majority of those uses, read as a whole, AL1 is fully in compliance and up to date with.
We're not disagreeing with that. We're just disagreeing with all I'm pointing out to you is this. I mean, I would totally agree with you that AL1 is consistent with this and therefore it's not out of date by reference to it. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Right, and all I'm pointing out is that 86C actually is citing a number of different employment types, if I can say it that way. And your proposal is focused on logistics alone.
Largely logistics, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, just 87 then, final point. And my learned friend touched on this, so I don't want to labour it, but the 87B, storage and distribution operations at a variety of scales and in suitably accessible locations that allow for efficient, reliable, etc., etc. I appreciate what you say in terms of that's what, again, the appeals scheme is delivering. But it's a very large scale. It's not at a variety of scales, is it? leaving aside the remainder of AL1 in terms of your site. It's delivering a large scale set of.
Yes, it's delivering large scale, which is part of a variety of scales of uses that should be delivered within the local site.
Yeah, but again, there's no sense in which AL1 is not doesn't accord in some way with this.
No, AL1, as I said, I believe is in accordance with section 6.
Yeah, and in fact, just thinking about the point I've already just put to you about balanced economies, I mean, trying to seek economic growth in a balanced way is also consistent with 85 to 87 million people, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Now, just one final point is your prepaid paragraph 5.30. You state there. You state there that if the appeals not allowed, 1,200 to 1,600 full-time equivalent jobs would be lost to the West Northants economy. I mean, we should paragraph 5.30. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's not true, is it? Because if the AL1 if any other scheme that comes forward will provide jobs, won't it? So it's not true to say that you'll lose all the jobs from this allocation and they'll come forward in a different form under a different proposal. They may or may not be more or less than that, but there'll be lots of jobs that do come forward.
I think in the context of this appeal, sir, we've been here for 4 years and those jobs have not come forward yet. If this appeal was lost to the WNC economy, those jobs, we do not know when they would come forward. So
we don't know when, but when an allocation, when the compliance scheme does come forward and is permitted, then it will bring forward lots of jobs.
So it might be a data centre if highways is an issue. If I've inspected, so it could be 0 jobs. So we do not know. What we do know is the scheme is looking at circa 1,200 at the lower end, 1,600 jobs. So we know by not allowing this appeal, those jobs would be lost. That's what we can physically know.
Yeah, but it is fair to say it's likely that jobs will come forward on this site. It's an employment allocation. We don't know how many, but we do know that jobs will come forward. It could be more, potentially.
Yes, agreed. We do not know jobs will come forward.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Buckley. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of points from me. Back to the SPD. Now, I understand your point, your argument that you say you don't need to identify exceptional circumstances for a large building to be acceptable on AL1 in terms of the SPD. If I were to conclude, contrary to that position, that yes, exceptional circumstances are required to be demonstrated in some way, so that the development would be acceptable in terms of the SPD specifically, and we'll come on to the policy in a minute, but in terms of the SPD, what do you think that there are exceptional circumstances? And if so, what are they?
So, I guess normally when we look at exceptional, very special circumstances, there are clearly defining tests of which we must adhere to. There is no.
Well, I'm not sure there are very clear tests for exceptional circumstances, because there's all sorts of exceptional circumstances tests in national policy. But in terms of in terms of this, it doesn't say what the exceptional circumstances are, do they? So, do you think there are exceptional circumstances?
If one was to read it as exceptional circumstances were required, then yes, I would believe so. I believe the evidence need from Mr. Brooks has shown an incredibly massive shortage of supply in the region, a supply that through no development coming forward is of course worsening over the years. If you were to look at design from Mr. Hammond, of course, that is another element to take into consideration in exceptional circumstances, and of course the evidence of Mr. Anderson in terms of delivering a net benefit to the highways network. The three kind of key points, I guess, raised during this inquiry, in my view, all point to exceptional circumstances in favour of allowing this to go.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of SS2,
yes.
which is, we've gone through numerous times, sort of follows through AL1, reference to SS2, go to SS2, that then in relation to that takes you through to the SPD. If I were to conclude, and all the references been to 1B of SS2, if I were to conclude with the council and Dave Coaster now that the scheme failed 1B in some way, does that mean I should refuse planning permission for the scheme?
No, sir. So obviously, if you read policy SS21, planning permission will be granted where, and then if you click over the page to part 2, it says proposals that contravene the above criteria. So if you were to consider it was contravening part D, will be refused unless outweighed by other material considerations, which might be those exceptional circumstances we just talked about.
Okay, thanks. I think just yeah, that's it. Okay, so thank you very much. So I Mr. Riley spent it took me a second there to so many names, so many weeks.
So I think I should be no more than 15 minutes. I hope to keep it 10 and about just more words from the examination. Mr. Guthrie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to take these in chronological order, so cast your mind back
Yes.
to I feel like weeks ago, a few hours ago. Firstly, do you recall you were asked some questions by my learned friend for the council about SPD compliance, and you pointed to the compliance node CD 107, and the point was put to you, oh, well, in every part of that node, you're saying why the SPD is unsound, you're not saying why you comply with it.
Yes.
I just want to examine that. Can I ask you to go to the SPD compliance node CD 107?
Yes, I have it.
And when you're there, can I ask you to go to page 8, please? The PDF and the hard copy pages align. And this is in table 1, where you're setting out SPD text, and then you can see you're giving a comment.
Yes, I can see that.
And I think the point was put by my learned friend in relation to design and placemaking, and whether you comply with it there. 6.25, where you're dealing with building height, scale, and massing.
Yes.
Is there any reference in the bold text response so that you consider the SPD to be unsound? Or are you in fact addressing the requirement there?
No, the final paragraph, line, sentence is these mitigation measures are considered robust in accordance with the expectations of the SPD.
And just briefly, same question again in relation to 6.26, which is dealing with the placemaking elements of the SPD. In the board response there, are you simply saying, well, the SPD is unsound, so you don't need to deal with it?
Be careful about leading there. That sounds.
Do you reference the SPD being unsound there?
No, I state that the application complies to the SPD.
Sorry, Mr. Rice, I hate to interrupt you, but I think to give a fair reflection, it is necessary to look at what else is said in that document.
I'll read.
That's the point. I also should say that I didn't say that he hadn't dealt with compliance. I said that in every part of this document he's saying this unsound.
Yeah,
I didn't say the other bit that you mentioned.
No, well, I did put the question as it was put to you that every part of the document was unsound. I was just taking the witness to parts of the document where unsoundness is a factor. But the inspector say you'll read that.
I've made it.
Next point, scale and massing.
Yes.
You recall you were asked some questions taken to, I think, the line 13.23 about small and medium buildings. You were taken to the examiner's report, the inspector's report, and told I've got to bear in mind the need for a detailed landscape assessment, etc. A lot of questions about scale and massing.
Yes.
I just want to ask you a few questions on that. If the council and the examiner had concerns that scale and massing meant only small and medium buildings were acceptable on AL1, which I think is the proposition, could policy AL1 have said so?
Yes.
Does AL1 say so?
No.
And if it was that important view, if that was a key consideration for the council or for the examiner, would you expect the point to be dealt with in the supporting text, or would you expect the point to be dealt with in the policy?
In the supporting text. Oh, sorry, in the policy.
Third question. Can you pick up the SPD?
Yes.
And this, I suppose, well, do you recall you were taken to paragraph 2.22?
Yes.
And this is just the point that it was put to you that, well, there's one bullet point here that talks about meeting the demand for small and medium-sized units. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
Let me just ask you this. Are there other bullet points that could be relevant to the appeal proposal or the allocation?
Yes, the 4 other bullet points on that list.
Second last question or area of questions. Your point, and we'll take this quite quickly because I appreciate it's been examined quite a lot. 6.25
In the SPD, sorry.
in the SPD. And some time by a letter from the council was spent on this point, and the point that was put to you was, well, that second sentence about large buildings, that's where you get the exceptionality test being inferred in, and you gave a clear answer that you disagreed with that. I just want to see how the SPD deals with that point for other allocations. So if we turn to paragraph 6.47, which is the equivalent paragraph for AL2.
Yes, sorry, I know.
Yeah. Is the exceptionality test there expressly referred to, or is it just implied?
It's expressly referred to in the last sentence of that paragraph.
And same question again in relation to paragraph 6.67. Which is the, 6.66, which is the equivalent paragraph for AL4. Again, is it the exceptional test expressly said there, or is it inferred?
Again, so it's expressly referred.
So does that in any way inform your view as to whether the SPD for AL1 is inferring the exceptionality test for AL1?
Yes, that's where I've taken my view from.
Final question, and it's the only question arising out of my learned friend for the Rule 6 parties cross-examination. The point was put, and you may want to therefore have up the inspector's report against the local.
Yes, I have that.
Now, the point was put that, well, the examiner made no express reference to, in fact, any size or scale of logistics, not small, not large. But I just want to ask what the examiner is thinking about. Can you see at paragraph 98? The examiner talks about the need for the second part of the policy to allocate sites to provide additional and flexible opportunity. Can you see that at 98?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
And if you turn then to 99, can you see the reference to, furthermore, it's over the page, furthermore, to ensure that the allocations would supply the range of property types referred to in the LPP2's evidence base, a modification is necessary, which outlines the requirement for supporting studies of a range of uses. Can you see that?
I can, yes.
Yeah. So, what does that? What is the examiner looking for in terms of the range of uses? Is he saying small? Is he saying large? Is he saying something else?
He's saying that the mix of uses, be it small, medium, or large, should meet the market requirements at that time.
And what does the market requirement evidence at this time say is needed?
From Mr. Brooks' evidence, it's large floor plate unit, principally, not explicitly, large floor plate units over 100,000 square foot.
So in your view, is the examiner open to the possibility of larger scale units coming forward on this site if the evidence exists?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guthrie. Thank you. So those were my questions.
Right, okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Guthrie. Be at ease now. Sure you were at ease throughout. So that brings us to the end of this part of the inquiry, the majority of the inquiry. We obviously will, there's the outstanding any written evidence in terms of the conditions and these unilateral undertaking by the dates already referred to. And then, as I said, we've got a potential, if needed, virtual session set up for the 14th, haven't we? Just to finalise conditions and obligations, but only if I consider it necessary. If having got all of everything in writing, I don't think it's necessary, I'll let you know that it's not necessary. Either way, we then have closing submissions on the 20th, don't we? Okay, again, virtually.
So just to let you know, on the if the 14th does happen, I won't be there, but Mr. Weeks, I think would be there.
Right. Okay. I think my understanding was that.
No, maybe it's all.
I think it was all going.
I think it would be.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Thanks. Is the council able to host that virtually with your high tech?
So would it be like a Teams
Yeah.
meeting type?
Or is it? Would you prefer? I mean, Pins can do it if you prefer.
Yeah, we weren't sure whether it would be like the CMC that Pins hosted or if the council hosts it. I believe we can do it, sir. But we'll confirm.
No problem. We'll keep it the same as the CMC, and I'll ask the case officer to send stuff. I mean, it's just whether we press a few buttons or you press a few buttons, isn't it? But Pins will press those buttons that need to be pressed. Okay, so Pins will arrange both. I'm just thinking, do we need details of, we potentially do though need, could you email Brown, the case officer, the names of people who are going to take part each of the round table if it's needed and at the closings, just so that he's got people to invite. As long as he's got one person, you can forward it on, so that's fine. Right, I think that's it. Are there any other queries from anybody in terms of any procedural matters between here and the close of the inquiry?
It's not a procedural matter, but I think it would be helpful for the council and probably for you to know now. I mean, the council isn't proposing to make any cost applications, but I do recall that at the CMC, the appellant had been reserving its position. But we've not had any, skeleton argument or the type of things that are mentioned in the guidance or any indication that any application is being made. But if there is one to be made, I think I need to know because that's going to add on time to our closing day. And also I need to be able to respond to it.
Okay, are you able to comment in terms of that? I mean, just to say, as I set out at the CMC, I said, well, I did ask whether you go to the said it was reserving your position. I think there is a skeleton that has been submitted, hasn't? Yeah.
It may be there, but I haven't seen it.
Well, perhaps are you able to give any indication for it?
I can confirm it in some this. Currently, it's the case that it remains that we have no instructions to do so. If that changes, obviously, so we wanted to allow all the evidence to finish. Yeah. We will, of course, revert back ASAP if that changes. And we'll be able to do that with my learned friend ASAP, but currently no instructions. But just on a practical point of view, I think even if an application were to be made and we really have no instructions to do so, I don't think it would disrupt the procedure because even things can be done in writing the time for response. So
yeah, well, I mean, as I indicated in the CMC, and I think it's in the note, which is basically any cost application is going to be made obviously as soon as possible, but at the latest at that closing, and then to be dealt with in writing thereafter and at set dates.
Right.
So I don't think it would.
All right.
Yeah, so no need,
I wouldn't need to respond that day.
no.
What you're saying,
You
well, that's
wouldn't
fine.
even have, you wouldn't even have read it because it
No, that's
potentially would only have come. But ultimately, it can only be when the inquiry actually closes, yeah, that is the final opportunity.
Yes, I think I would, so I think the guidance does this, I think I would like to have some notice, but I just need to manage my own diary and the council will need to, gather evidence.
Yeah.
On and
So
so on.
as a matter of professional courtesy, I can certainly say we will revert to my learned friend with confirmation.
As soon as you.
As soon as, we've heard that message and I entirely understand,
Yeah.
but we will.
I might, what perhaps you should just do, so I definitely definitely on, I think the appellant has submitted to PIMS a skeleton, which I've not read, I just thought what it was. Can I ask you to check on that and if, well, I think what I would say is, can you either withdraw that, so I don't have it, and I haven't read it, so withdraw it, or share it with the council, assuming it's against the council. Well, I'm telling them it is against the council, but as I say, I haven't read it, so if they withdraw it,
Then we're back to start, which is fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I would appreciate that, just for the
yeah.
time.
But if you could just confirm it, if you are going to withdraw it, then share it. Yeah. Okay, well, with that, I would first of all like to thank everybody for their contributions against all the odds, with everybody's cooperation and my chivying along. We have, apart from the closings, finished the inquiry on time with 14 minutes to spare. So that is very good. And I do thank you all for that. Thank everybody for their good behaviour. I appreciate, particularly from interested parties in the audience, that it's an important matter to you. You have very strong feelings about it, and I do appreciate the fact that you've sat there patiently and respectfully throughout. So I very much do appreciate that, and for that I thank you. Also, just like to thank the council for the excellent facilities they provided for us. Everything's worked fantastically. I was going to particularly thank a gentleman whose name I don't know, who sorted out our IT for us, and he ran away just at the point that I would be about to thank him. But I thank him. What do we know his name? Richard. Well, thank you to Richard for sorting that all out so excellently. So if all councils provided facilities like this for public inquiries, the world would be a better place, wouldn't it? So for that, I thank you. With that, enjoy your weekend, and for those who I'll be seeing in due course virtually, I look forward to seeing you again. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Sort of